This is Atlas, coming to you live from Station Beacon. It's been 73 days since the first reports of the virus. The date is August 15th, 2026, and the world as we knew it is gone. If you're hearing this broadcast, you're one of the lucky ones. You're still human, but don't let your guard down. The infected are everywhere, and they're always hunting. Let me bring you up to speed on our current situation. The infection spread faster than anyone could have imagined. One day, people were going about their normal lives. The next, our cities were overrun by the infected. They're not zombies, not exactly, but they might as well be. The virus turns people into mindless, aggressive creatures driven only by the need to spread the infection. Here's what we know so far. The virus is spread through bodily fluids, mainly saliva and blood. Symptoms appear within 12 hours of infection. And as of now, there's no cure. But don't lose hope. There are still pockets of survivors out there. Military outposts, research facilities working on a cure. We're not alone in this fight. Now, let's talk about the global situation. As far as we can tell, no country has been spared. The virus doesn't discriminate. Rich, poor, young, old, it affects everyone equally. Major cities were hit first and hit hard. New York, London, Tokyo, they fell within days. The sheer population density made containment impossible. Rural areas fared better initially, but as infected individuals fled the cities, even the most remote locations eventually succumbed. Governments tried to respond, but they were overwhelmed. Military forces were deployed in many countries, but they were fighting a losing battle. In some areas, they managed to establish quarantine zones, but these are few and far between. If you're near one, proceed with caution. They might offer safety, but they're also prime targets for large groups of infected. Communication networks have largely collapsed. Internet, cell phones, even traditional landlines are down in most areas. Radio has become one of the few reliable means of long-distance communication. That's why stations like ours are so crucial. We're not just providing information. We're a lifeline connecting the scattered remnants of humanity. But it's not all doom and gloom. Humanity is resilient. We've faced pandemics, wars, and natural disasters before, and we've always found a way to survive. This is no different. Yes, the scale is unprecedented, and yes, the infected pose a unique threat. But we're adapting. People are forming communities, sharing resources, and watching out for each other. In the face of this crisis, the best of humanity is shining through. Now, let's talk about what you need to know to stay alive. First and foremost, avoid the infected at all costs. They're not human anymore, no matter how much they might look like someone you once knew. They're driven by the virus, and their only goal is to spread the infection. If you encounter one, do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Run, hide, do whatever you need to do to avoid contact. Stay inside during the day. The infected are more active when the sun's up. Use the night to scavenge for supplies, but be careful. Always travel in groups and never let your guard down. The infected might be more sluggish at night, but they're still dangerous. Water and food are your priorities. Clean water is especially crucial. The infrastructure in most areas has collapsed, so you can't rely on tap water anymore. Boil any water you find before drinking it. As for food, canned goods are your best friend. They last long and are usually safe to eat, but be careful with fresh produce or meat. If you're not sure about its safety, it's better to go hungry for a day than risk infection. Shelter is your next concern. Find a secure location, preferably somewhere with thick walls and few windows. Reinforce the entrances and create escape routes. Remember, in this new world, your home isn't just a place to sleep, it's your fortress against the infected. Now, I know this is a lot to take in. The world has changed, and it's changed fast. But remember, you're not alone. There are others out there, survivors like you, fighting to stay alive and maintain their humanity. And as long as Station Beacon is broadcasting, you'll have a friend in the darkness. In the coming hours, we'll be diving deeper into specific survival strategies, sharing reports from different regions, and even taking questions from other survivors. But for now, I want you all to take a moment. Take a deep breath. You're alive. You're fighting. And that's what matters. This is Atlas, your voice in the darkness. Stay safe, stay human, and keep listening to Station Beacon. We're in this together, and together, we'll find a way through this nightmare. Now, let's move on to our next segment. I've been receiving reports about changes in the danger zones and safe areas across the region. This information is crucial for anyone planning to move or scavenge, so listen carefully. Remember, the situation is fluid, and what was safe yesterday might be overrun today. Let's start with the bad news. The city center, which had been relatively quiet for the past week, has seen a significant increase in infected activity. If you were planning a supply run there, I'd advise against it. Our scouts report seeing large hordes moving through the main streets, particularly around the old hospital and the shopping district. It's possible they're drawn to these areas by the scent of survivors who've been scavenging there. Whatever the reason, it's become a hot zone. Avoid it at all costs. On the other hand, the industrial park on the outskirts of town has shown a decrease in infected presence. This could be a good opportunity for those of you running low on supplies. There are several warehouses in the area that might still have unspoiled goods. But remember, just because we haven't seen many infected doesn't mean they're not there. Always approach with caution. The suburb to the north, particularly the area around the old high school, has remained relatively stable. We've had consistent reports of a small group of survivors holed up in the school building. They've managed to secure the perimeter and seem to be doing well. If you're in dire need of help and in that area, it might be worth trying to make contact. But approach openly and unarmed. In these times, trust is hard to come by, and you don't want to be mistaken for a threat. Now, I've got some potentially good news for those of you farther out. We've been picking up chatter about a safe zone being established by the military about 50 miles to the east. It's supposedly located in a small town that was quickly quarantined at the start of the outbreak. Now, I want to stress that this is unconfirmed. We haven't been able to make direct contact or send scouts to verify. But if it's true, it could be a game changer. A secure location with military protection could be just what we need to start rebuilding. However, and I can't stress this enough, do not make any rash decisions based on this information. The journey there would be incredibly dangerous, especially if it turns out to be a false hope. For now, stay where you are unless absolutely necessary. We'll keep working on confirming this information, and I'll update you as soon as we know more. One area that's become increasingly dangerous is the highway leading out of the city. We've had multiple reports of infected hordes using the open road as a migration path. It seems they're drawn to the movement and noise of vehicles, making any attempt to drive out of the city extremely risky. If you must travel, stick to back roads and less obvious routes. The river that runs through the eastern part of our region has become something of a natural barrier. The infected seem to have trouble crossing it, making the far bank a somewhat safer area. If you're on that side, count yourself lucky. If you're considering trying to cross to get there, think very carefully. The bridges are likely to be either destroyed or heavily infested, and swimming across carries its own risks. Now, let's talk about a few specific locations that you should be aware of. The old library downtown has been converted into a makeshift medical center by a group of survivors. They're running low on supplies, but are still trying to help anyone who comes their way. If you have medical training or supplies to spare, consider making your way there. Just be aware that the surrounding blocks are heavily infested, so any approach needs to be carefully planned. The farmlands to the south have been hit hard recently. We're not sure why, but there's been a significant movement of infected in that direction. If you've been relying on those areas for food, you might need to find alternatives. It's possible that the infected are drawn to the livestock, or maybe they're just migrating. Either way, it's become a high-risk area. On a more positive note, the old power plant on the western edge of our broadcast range has been secured by a group of engineers. They've managed to get one of the generators running and are working on expanding their safe zone. If you have technical skills, they could use the help. Plus, having a stable power source could be invaluable in the long run. I want to remind everyone that these safe zones and danger areas are not set in stone. The infected are unpredictable, and their movements can change rapidly. Always be prepared for the situation to shift. Have multiple escape routes planned, and never let your guard down even in areas that have been safe for a while. For those of you who've been with us from the beginning, you might remember the old mall we used to list as a good scavenging spot. Well, I'm afraid it's officially off the list now. A large horde moved in about a week ago and they haven't left. It's possible there are still supplies in there, but the risk is far too great. Consider it a total loss and stay away. Now, I know some of you might be thinking about trying to clear out some of these infested areas. I cannot emphasize enough how dangerous that would be. The infected might not be smart, but they have numbers on their side. Unless you have significant firepower and a well-organized group, taking on a horde is suicide. Your priority should always be avoidance and survival. Before we move on to our next segment, I want to touch on something important. In these times, information is one of our most valuable resources. If you're out there and you see changes in infected behavior or movements, if you discover new safe areas or danger zones, find a way to let us know. We're all in this together, and sharing information could save lives. Remember, stay alert, stay cautious, and most importantly, stay alive. The world has changed, but we're still here. We're still fighting. And as long as we stick together, as long as we keep our humanity, there's hope. Now let's move on to our weather report. You might think that with everything that's happening, the weather would be the least of our concerns. But trust me, in this new world, understanding the weather patterns could mean the difference between life and death. So, let's break down what we're seeing and how it might affect both us and the infected. Currently, we're looking at a high-pressure system moving in from the west. This means we can expect clear skies and rising temperatures over the next few days. Now, under normal circumstances, this would be great news. But in our current situation, it's a mixed blessing at best. First, let's talk about how this weather affects the infected. We've observed that they tend to be more active in warmer temperatures. The heat seems to accelerate their metabolism, making them more aggressive and mobile. So, with these rising temperatures, we can expect to see increased infected activity, especially during the day. For those of you planning any daytime movements or scavenging runs, I strongly advise against it. The combination of clear skies and increased infected activity makes it extremely dangerous. If you absolutely must move during the day, stick to the shadows, stay hydrated, and be prepared to hide at a moment's notice. On the flip side, clear nights can be beneficial for us survivors. The moonlight can provide better visibility for nighttime operations without the need for artificial light that might attract the infected. Just be aware that the lack of cloud cover means temperatures will drop significantly at night. If you're out scavenging, dress in layers. Now let's look ahead to the weekend. Our meteorological equipment isn't what it used to be, but from what we can gather, there's a possibility of a cold front moving in late Saturday or early Sunday. This could bring some much-needed rain to our area. Rain can be a double-edged sword in our current situation. On one hand, it can help mask our scent and the sound of our movements, making it easier to evade the infected. It's also crucial for those of you trying to grow your own food. But on the other hand, rain makes travel more difficult and can spoil unsecured food supplies. If the rain does come, use it to your advantage. It's a great opportunity to collect fresh water. Set up rain catchers on your roofs or in open areas. Just remember to boil or purify any water you collect before drinking it. One thing we've noticed about the infected during rainy weather is that they seem to become somewhat disoriented. The rain interferes with their ability to detect sound and scent, which are their primary means of locating prey. This could provide an opportunity for necessary travel or scavenging, but don't let your guard down. They're still dangerous, even if they're confused. Looking further ahead, we're moving into late summer, and that means we need to start preparing for autumn. The changing seasons bring new challenges. As temperatures start to drop, we'll need to think about warmer clothing and heating for our shelters. Start gathering firewood now if you can, but be careful about smoke. It can attract both the infected and potentially hostile survivors. The fall also means changing vegetation. As leaves start to turn and fall, we'll lose some of our natural cover. Areas that were once safe hiding spots might become exposed. Start scouting alternative routes and hiding spots now, before the leaves fall. On a related note, let's talk about the environmental changes we've seen since the outbreak. With human activity drastically reduced, nature is starting to reclaim our cities and towns. This has both positive and negative implications for us survivors. We're seeing an increase in wildlife in urban areas. This can be a good food source if you know how to hunt or trap safely. However, be aware that larger predators like bears or mountain lions might also be moving into areas they previously avoided. These animals can be just as dangerous as the infected if you're not careful. The lack of maintenance on our infrastructure is also starting to show. Roads are beginning to crack and buckle, especially after the summer heat. If you're using vehicles, be prepared for deteriorating road conditions. Bridges, in particular, should be approached with caution. Without regular maintenance, we don't know how long they'll remain safe to cross. In urban areas, we're seeing a lot of flooding due to clogged storm drains. After any significant rainfall, expect low-lying areas to be underwater. This can cut off escape routes, so always have alternative paths planned. One unexpected benefit of the environmental changes is the improvement in air quality. Without industrial pollution and vehicle emissions, the air is cleaner than it's been in decades. This might seem like a small thing, but cleaner air means better health for us survivors. It's easier to run and fight when you can breathe clearly. However, this environmental shift isn't all positive. We're seeing some worrying signs of industrial accidents occurring without human intervention. There have been reports of chemical spills from abandoned factories and refineries. If you notice any unusual smells or see signs of chemical leakage, stay far away and warn other survivors if you can. Now, let's circle back to our immediate weather concerns. With the high-pressure system moving in, we're also looking at lower humidity levels. This means an increased risk of fires. We've already seen several wildfires start in areas where the infected have congregated. Whether it's from their mindless interactions with abandoned technology or just the sheer heat generated by their hordes, these fires can quickly get out of control. If you see smoke or fire, don't assume it's a signal from other survivors. Treat any fire as a potential threat. Not only can it obviously burn you, but it will attract the infected from miles around. They seem drawn to the light and movement of flames. For those of you in wooded areas, start creating fire breaks around your shelters if you haven't already. Clear away dry brush and create a defensible space. Not only will this help protect you from wildfires, but it also gives you a clear line of sight to spot approaching infected. I want to touch on another weather-related concern: thunderstorms. While our current forecast doesn't show any on the horizon, they're always a possibility this time of year. Thunderstorms present a unique set of challenges in our post-outbreak world. First and foremost, lightning strikes can trigger fires, especially in dry conditions. But perhaps more concerning is the effect of thunder on the infected. We've observed that loud, sudden noises like thunder can send them into a frenzy. They'll run towards the sound, which means a thunderstorm can cause infected from miles around to converge on your area. If you hear a storm approaching, get inside immediately, not just because of the lightning risk, but to avoid the stampede of infected that might follow. Secure your shelter and be prepared to wait it out quietly. On the topic of noise, let's discuss wind for a moment. The upcoming high-pressure system means we'll likely see some windy days. While this can be good for drying clothes or generating power if you have wind turbines, it also carries risks. Strong winds can carry sounds and scents much farther than usual. That means the infected might pick up on your presence from a greater distance. If you need to travel on windy days, be extra cautious. Try to move with the wind at your back. This will carry your scent away from you, making it less likely for the infected to pick up your trail. Wind can also be problematic for our makeshift shelters. If you're in a less sturdy structure, take some time to reinforce it. Use whatever materials you can find to secure roofs and walls. A collapse during a windstorm could leave you exposed at the worst possible moment. Now, I know all this weather talk might seem mundane given our circumstances, but believe me, understanding these patterns can save your life. The infected might not care about getting wet or sunburned, but we do. We need to use every advantage we can get, and sometimes that advantage is as simple as knowing when to stay inside and when it's safe to venture out. Remember, in this new world, we're not just survivors. We're meteorologists, botanists, and wildlife experts all rolled into one. Every bit of knowledge about our environment can help us stay one step ahead of the infected. As we continue our broadcast, keep in mind that these weather patterns affect everything we do. From scavenging routes to defensive strategies, we need to adapt to the world around us. Stay alert, stay informed, and most importantly, stay alive. Now, let's move on to our next segment. We've received some disturbing reports about changes in infected behavior that I think you all need to be aware of. But first, I want to stay calm. Knowledge is power, and the more we understand about the infected, the better equipped we are to survive. Over the past week, we've received multiple reports from different survivor groups about changes in infected behavior. Now, I want to stress that these are observations from the field, not confirmed scientific data. But the consistency of these reports across different areas suggests there might be something to them. First, let's talk about the infected's activity patterns. Previously, we've noted that they tend to be more active during the day and somewhat sluggish at night. However, recent reports indicate that this pattern might be shifting. Several groups have observed increased nighttime activity among the infected, particularly during the hours just before dawn. This could be a response to the changing seasons and shortening days, or it could be a more fundamental evolution in their behavior. Whatever the cause, it means we need to adjust our strategies. If you've been relying on nighttime for safer movement or scavenging, be extra cautious, especially in those pre-dawn hours. Another concerning development is the apparent change in the infected's sensory capabilities. We've always known they rely heavily on sound and smell to detect potential victims. But now, we're getting reports that suggest their visual acuity might be improving. Survivors have reported infected individuals reacting to movement at much greater distances than before, even in low-light conditions. This doesn't mean they've suddenly developed superhuman vision, but it does mean we need to be more careful about staying hidden. When you're moving, try to stick to areas with lots of cover. Avoid open spaces whenever possible, and if you must cross them, do so quickly and quietly. On a related note, there have been several accounts of infected showing signs of rudimentary problem-solving skills. Now, don't panic. We're not talking about them suddenly becoming strategic geniuses, but there have been instances of infected working together to overcome simple obstacles. For example, one group reported seeing a small horde form a sort of ladder to reach a second-story window where survivors were hiding. Another described infected taking turns ramming a barricaded door until it gave way. These aren't complex strategies, but they show a level of coordination we haven't seen before. What does this mean for us? It means we need to be more thorough in our defenses. Don't rely on simple barriers or assume that a locked door will keep you safe. Create multiple layers of defense and always have an escape route planned. Now, let's talk about something that might actually work in our favor. We've received several reports of infected showing increased sensitivity to certain environmental factors. Specifically, they seem to be more affected by extreme temperatures than before. During the recent heat wave, survivors in urban areas noticed a significant decrease in infected activity during the hottest parts of the day. Similarly, in regions experiencing unseasonably cold weather, the infected appeared to become more sluggish and less aggressive. This could provide us with windows of opportunity for safer movement or scavenging. However, it also means we need to be extra vigilant during mild weather when the infected are likely to be at their most active. Another interesting observation relates to the infected's reaction to water. Previously, we've noted that they don't seem to have any particular aversion to water. They would wade through streams or even swim short distances if they detected prey on the other side. However, recent reports suggest this might be changing. Several groups have observed infected individuals showing reluctance to enter even shallow water. In some cases, they've been seen gathering at the edges of rivers or lakes, seemingly unable or unwilling to cross. We don't know if this is a widespread phenomenon or limited to certain areas, but it's worth keeping in mind. Bodies of water that were once easily crossed by the infected might now serve as more effective barriers. Let's move on to another aspect of infected behavior that's crucial for our survival: their feeding patterns. From the outbreak's early days, we've known that the infected are driven by an insatiable hunger, not just to eat, but to spread the infection. However, new observations suggest there might be more nuance to this behavior than we initially thought. Survivors in several locations have reported seeing infected individuals seemingly storing food. They've been observed dragging uninfected animals or even human victims to specific locations, often sheltered areas like abandoned buildings or dense vegetation. It's unclear whether this is an attempt to save food for later or some other instinct, but it's a behavior we haven't seen before. This development has several implications for us. First, it means that areas where we've seen infected congregating might be more dangerous than we realized. They could be hoarding victims there, which means more infected in one place. Second, it suggests that the infected might be developing some form of memory or pattern recognition. They're returning to the same places repeatedly, which means they might be able to remember locations where they've encountered prey before. On a related note, we've also received reports of changes in the infected's hunting strategies. Previously, they seemed to rely almost entirely on random encounters, reacting to stimuli in their immediate vicinity. Now, however, there are signs that they might be developing more active hunting behaviors. Several survivor groups have reported being stalked by infected individuals. These infected would follow groups of survivors for extended periods, always staying just out of sight. They wouldn't attack immediately, but would seem to wait for vulnerable moments or try to herd the survivors towards larger groups of infected. This behavior, if widespread, represents a significant shift in the threat level posed by the infected. It means we can no longer rely on simply avoiding immediate detection. We need to be constantly aware of our surroundings, watching for signs of pursuit or ambush. Now, I know all of this sounds frightening. The idea that the infected might be evolving, becoming more dangerous, is terrifying. But remember, knowledge is power. By understanding these changes, we can adapt our strategies and stay one step ahead. Let's talk about some practical ways we can respond to these developments. First and foremost, we need to prioritize stealth even more than before. Given the infected's apparently improved visual acuity and possible stalking behavior, staying hidden is more important than ever. When you're moving, take the time to plan your route carefully. Use natural cover whenever possible. Stick to shadows, move slowly, and be prepared to freeze or hide at a moment's notice. If you're in a group, consider having a dedicated lookout, someone whose sole job is to watch for signs of the infected. Next, we need to rethink our defensive strategies. Simple barricades are no longer enough. We need to create layered defenses with multiple fallback positions. Consider setting up early warning systems, noisemakers, or tripwires that can alert you to approaching infected before they reach your shelter. If you're in an area with access to water, consider using it as part of your defenses. The infected's apparent new aversion to water could be a valuable tool. A moat or even a simple channel of water around your shelter might provide an extra layer of protection. We also need to adjust our scavenging strategies. Given the infected's possible food storage behavior, areas that we previously thought were picked clean might actually contain hidden caches. When you're searching abandoned areas, look for signs of recent infected activity. Check hidden corners, locked rooms, or overgrown areas, but be extremely cautious. These areas might also contain higher concentrations of infected. Another important point to consider is the infected's increased nighttime activity. If you've been relying on the cover of darkness for your operations, you might need to rethink your schedule. Consider shifting your active hours to the early morning, just after dawn. This seems to be when the infected are least active, possibly due to the transition between their new nighttime activity and their previous daytime patterns. Now, let's talk about communication. In light of these developments, it's more important than ever that we share information. If you observe new behaviors in the infected, find a way to spread the word. Use radio if you have access to equipment, or set up physical message boards in safe areas. The more we know, the better prepared we'll be. I want to touch on something that might seem obvious, but it's worth repeating. Do not attempt to study the infected up close. I know the scientist in some of you might be tempted to get a closer look, to try and understand these changes better. Resist that urge. The risk is simply too great. Observe from a safe distance and only when absolutely necessary. Remember, despite these changes, the fundamental nature of the infected hasn't changed. They're still driven by the virus, still focused on spreading the infection. They're not suddenly going to start using tools or developing complex strategies. What we're seeing is more like the virus optimizing its hosts, making them more efficient predators. This brings me to an important point. Hope. Yes, the infected are changing, adapting, but so are we. Every day that we survive, every new piece of information we gather, makes us stronger, more resilient. We're learning too, developing new strategies, new ways to stay safe. And let's not forget, there are still research facilities out there working on a cure. The more we learn about how the virus hosts, the closer they might be to finding a way to stop it. Every observation we make, every piece of information we share, could be the key to unlocking a cure. So stay vigilant, stay cautious, but also stay hopeful. We're survivors. We've made it this far and we'll keep going. Keep listening to Station Beacon for more updates. We'll continue to gather and share information to keep all of us safe. Now, let's move on to our next segment. We've received some questions from other survivors about basic survival techniques. In light of the changing behavior of the infected, it's a good time to revisit some of these fundamental skills. Whether you're a seasoned survivor or someone who's just found safety, these tips could save your life. Let's start with the absolute basics: infection prevention. This is your number one priority. Remember, the virus is spread through bodily fluids, primarily saliva and blood. Any contact with an infected individual, no matter how brief, could be fatal. Always assume that any stranger you encounter could be infected, even if they appear healthy. The virus has an incubation period, and someone could be carrying it without showing symptoms. When you're out scavenging or moving between safe locations, cover as much of your skin as possible. Wear long sleeves, long pants, and closed-toe shoes. If you can find them, gloves and safety goggles provide extra protection. A mask or bandana over your nose and mouth isn't just for show, it can prevent accidental ingestion of airborne particles that might carry the virus. If you do come into contact with blood or other bodily fluids, clean the area immediately. Soap and water is best, but in a pinch, use alcohol-based sanitizers or even strong alcohol like vodka. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. If you have any open wounds, keep them covered at all times. Now, let's talk about movement and stealth. As we discussed earlier, the infected seem to be developing better visual acuity and possibly more complex hunting behaviors. This means we need to be even more careful about how we move. When you're traveling, always plan your route in advance. Look for paths with plenty of cover, buildings, dense vegetation, anything that can break line of sight. Move slowly and deliberately. Quick movements are more likely to catch the eye of the infected. If you need to cross open areas, wait and observe first. Look for patterns in the infected's movements. They often patrol in predictable patterns, and you can use this to your advantage. Learn to move silently. Practice walking heel to toe, distributing your weight evenly. If you're in a group, use hand signals to communicate. Unnecessary noise can attract infected from surprisingly far away. Always be aware of your surroundings. Train yourself to constantly scan your environment, looking for signs of the infected or other dangers. Look for fresh tracks. Listen for unusual sounds, and trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. When it comes to scavenging, efficiency is key. The longer you're out in the open, the greater your risk. Before you enter any building or area, observe it from a safe distance. Look for signs of recent activity, either from survivors or the infected. Check for exit routes in case you need to make a quick escape. Once you're inside, move quickly but quietly. Have a mental checklist of priority items: food, water, medical supplies, tools. Don't waste time on non-essentials. If you're in a group, split up to cover more ground, but always stay within sight or earshot of each other. Be cautious about what you take. Canned goods are generally safe, but be wary of anything unsealed. If you're not sure about the safety of food or water, it's better to leave it behind. Your health is more important than a single meal. Now let's discuss shelter. Your home base is your fortress against the infected. It needs to be secure, hidden, and self-sufficient. When choosing a location, look for structures with thick walls and few ground-level entry points. Upper floors of buildings can be good choices, as the infected seem to have trouble with stairs. Once you've chosen a location, focus on fortification. Board up ground-level windows and reinforce doors. Create multiple barriers if possible. Remember, we've seen the infected work together to overcome obstacles, so a single barricade might not be enough. Set up early warning systems. This could be as simple as a line of tin cans on a string, or more complex tripwires if you have the materials. The goal is to give yourself as much warning as possible if the infected approach. Inside your shelter, organize your supplies carefully. Have a go bag ready at all times with essential supplies in case you need to evacuate quickly. Keep weapons easily accessible but safely stored. Speaking of weapons, let's address that topic. In our current world, the ability to defend yourself is unfortunately necessary. However, remember that fighting the infected should always be a last resort. The risk of infection is too high. If you do need to fight, aim for disabling blows. Damaging the legs can slow them down without the risk of spraying infected blood. Blunt weapons are generally safer than bladed ones for this reason. If you have firearms, use them sparingly. The noise can attract more infected. Now, let's talk about one of the most crucial aspects of survival: water. Clean water is essential, and in many areas, the infrastructure that once provided it has broken down. Never assume that running water from taps is safe to drink. Always purify your water. The safest method is boiling. Bring water to a rolling boil for at least 1 minute or 3 minutes at higher altitudes. If you can't boil water, chemical purification tablets are a good alternative. In a pinch, you can use household bleach 8 drops per gallon of water, but be sure it's plain bleach without any additives. Collecting rainwater can be an excellent source of relatively clean water. Set up containers during rainstorms, but remember to still purify this water before drinking. Food is our next priority. Canned goods are your best friends in this new world. They're sealed, long-lasting, and generally safe to eat. When scavenging, prioritize high-calorie, nutrient-dense foods. Peanut butter, dried fruits, nuts, these can provide a lot of energy in small packages. If you're in one place for a while, consider starting a small garden. Even a few pots of herbs or vegetables can supplement your diet and provide vital nutrients. Be cautious with wild plants unless you're absolutely certain of their safety. The risk of poisoning yourself isn't worth it. Hunting and fishing can be good sources of fresh food, but be careful. The noise and movement involved can attract the infected. If you do hunt, clean your kills far from your camp to avoid drawing infected to your base. Let's move on to medical care. In our current situation, even minor injuries or illnesses can become life-threatening. Stock up on first aid supplies whenever you can. Antiseptics, bandages, pain relievers, these should all be part of your basic medical kit. Learn basic first aid if you haven't already. Knowing how to clean and dress a wound properly can mean the difference between life and death. For larger injuries, learn how to apply a tourniquet, but remember this is a last resort for severe bleeding. Antibiotics are precious resources. Use them only when absolutely necessary, and always take the full course even if you start feeling better. Overuse of antibiotics can lead to resistant infections, which is the last thing we need right now. Mental health is just as important as physical health. The stress of constant survival can take a heavy toll. If you're with a group, talk to each other. Share your fears and your hopes. If you're alone, try to maintain a routine. It can provide a sense of normalcy in our chaotic world. Now, let's discuss group dynamics. If you're part of a survivor group, clear communication is essential. Establish clear roles and responsibilities. Have regular meetings to discuss plans, share information, and address any conflicts. Trust is crucial, but in our world, it needs to be earned. Be wary of newcomers until you're sure they're not infected. Have protocols in place for integrating new members into your group. If you're on your own, be cautious about approaching other survivors. Not everyone has maintained their humanity in this crisis. Observe from a distance before making contact. When you do approach, do so openly and unarmed to show you're not a threat. Let's talk about long-term planning. It's easy to get caught up in day-to-day survival, but we need to think about the future too. Start keeping records of your observations about the infected, weather patterns, safe zones, anything that might be useful. This information could be invaluable to other survivors or to researchers working on a cure. If you're in a stable location, start thinking about sustainable food sources. Learn about permaculture and sustainable farming techniques. Every bit of food you can produce yourself is one less risky scavenging trip. Also, consider your energy needs. Batteries will eventually run out. Solar chargers can be incredibly useful if you can find them. Learn about basic electrical systems. Being able to rig up a simple power source can greatly improve your quality of life. Lastly, never stop learning. Every skill you acquire makes you more valuable and more likely to survive. First aid, mechanics, gardening, hunting, all of these can be crucial. Share your knowledge with others whenever you can. The more we all know, the better our chances of survival as a species. Remember, in this new world, complacency is deadly. Always be prepared, always be vigilant, but never lose hope. We've survived this long, and we'll keep surviving. Humanity has faced disasters before, and we've always come. This time is no different. We'll adapt, we'll overcome, and someday we'll rebuild. Stay safe out there, and keep listening to Station Beacon. We're here for you, providing information and a reminder that you're not alone in this fight. Together, we'll make it through this crisis. Now, let's move on to our next segment. We've received some questions about water and food management. In our current situation, these are perhaps the most crucial aspects of survival. Let's dive into some detailed strategies for ensuring you have safe water and sufficient food to keep you going in these challenging times. Let's start with water, the most essential resource for our survival. In our post-outbreak world, we can't take clean water for granted anymore. The infrastructure that once provided us with safe drinking water has largely collapsed. So we need to be vigilant about our water sources and purification methods. First and foremost, never assume any water is safe to drink without treatment, even if it looks clear and clean. Streams, rivers, and lakes might seem pristine, but they can harbor dangerous bacteria and parasites. Even rainwater, which is generally cleaner than surface water, can pick up contaminants from the air or your collection surfaces. So, how do we make water safe to drink? The most reliable method is boiling. Bring your water to a rolling boil for at least 1 minute at sea level, or 3 minutes at higher altitudes. This will kill most pathogens that could make you sick. Let the water cool naturally before drinking. If you can't boil water, chemical purification is your next best option. Water purification tablets are ideal. They're lightweight, easy to use, and highly effective. Follow the instructions on the package carefully. In a pinch, you can use household bleach to purify water. Use 8 drops of plain bleach per gallon of water. Mix well, and let it stand for 30 minutes before drinking. Make sure you're using plain bleach without any additives or scents. For those of you who have managed to secure a more permanent shelter, consider setting up a rainwater collection system. This can be as simple as clean containers placed under your roof's downspouts, or more complex systems with large storage tanks. Remember, even rainwater should be purified before drinking. If you're in an area with snow, this can be an excellent source of water. Melt snow before drinking it. Eating snow directly can lower your body temperature and lead to dehydration. Always collect clean snow, avoiding any that's discolored or possibly contaminated. Now, let's talk about storing water. Once you've purified your water, you need to keep it safe. Use clean, food-grade containers with tight-fitting lids. Avoid containers that have been used for non-food items, as they may have residual chemicals that could contaminate your water. Store your water in a cool, dark place if possible. Even properly stored water can develop a flat taste over time. If this happens, you can improve the taste by pouring it back and forth between 2 clean containers to aerate it. If you have access to it, adding a pinch of salt per quart can also help. Remember, water isn't just for drinking. You need it for cooking, cleaning, and personal hygiene too. Plan your water supply accordingly. A good rule of thumb is to aim for at least 1 gallon per person per day for all uses. Now, let's move on to food management. In our current situation, every meal could be your last for a while, so we need to be smart about how we acquire, store, and consume our food. When it comes to scavenging for food, canned goods are your best friend. They're sealed against contamination, have a long shelf life, and often don't require cooking. When you're out scavenging, prioritize canned fruits, vegetables, and meats. These will provide a good balance of nutrients. Dry goods like rice, beans, and pasta are also excellent choices. They're calorie dense and can be stored for long periods. Just remember that they usually require water and heat to prepare, so factor that into your planning. Be cautious with perishable foods. If you come across fresh fruits or vegetables, consume them quickly before they spoil. Avoid any fresh meat unless you're absolutely certain it's safe. The risk of food poisoning in our current situation is too high to take chances. When you're scavenging, always check the expiration dates on food items. While many foods are safe to eat past their best by date, others can become dangerous. Use your senses if something smells off or looks moldy. Don't risk eating it. Now, let's talk about food preservation. In a world without refrigeration, we need to get creative about keeping our food edible for longer periods. One of the oldest and most effective methods is drying. If you have access to fresh fruits or meats, you can slice them thinly and dry them in the sun. This works best in hot, dry climates. In more humid areas, you might need to use smoke to help preserve the food and keep insects away. Smoking is particularly effective for preserving meat. If you have the resources to build a simple smoker, you can significantly extend the shelf life of any meat you manage to obtain. The smoke helps to dry the meat and also imparts chemicals that inhibit bacterial growth. Salting is another ancient preservation method that's still relevant today. If you can get your hands on salt, you can use it to cure meats and preserve vegetables. The salt draws out moisture, creating an environment where harmful bacteria can't thrive. For those of you with more permanent setups, consider learning about fermentation. Many vegetables can be preserved through fermentation, which not only extends their shelf life, but can also increase their nutritional value. Sauerkraut, for example, is a great source of vitamin C and can be made with just cabbage and salt. Let's talk about rationing. In our uncertain world, we never know when our next meal will come, so it's crucial to make our food last as long as possible. Divide your food supplies into portions and stick to a strict rationing schedule. It's better to eat small amounts regularly than to feast one day and starve the next. When planning your rations, aim for a balance of nutrients. Your body needs a mix of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats to function properly. Don't neglect micronutrients like vitamins and minerals either. Malnutrition can weaken your immune system, making you more vulnerable to diseases. If you're part of a group, consider centralizing your food supplies. This allows for better inventory management and ensures everyone gets a fair share. However, it's also wise for each person to keep a small personal emergency stash, just in case. Now, let's discuss cooking in our post-outbreak world. Many of us are used to the convenience of modern kitchens, but we need to adapt to cooking with limited resources. If you have access to a heat source, whether it's a campfire, a portable stove, or a jury-rigged setup, you're in a good position. One-pot meals are your friend. Stews, soups, and casseroles allow you to combine multiple ingredients, maximizing flavor and nutrition while minimizing fuel use. They're also a great way to use up odds and ends of different foods before they spoil. If you don't have a reliable heat source, focus on foods that can be eaten cold. Canned goods, dried fruits and nuts, and hard crackers or biscuits can form the basis of a meal without any cooking required. Remember, in our current situation, food safety is more important than ever. Always wash your hands before handling food, if you have the water to spare. Cook meat thoroughly to kill any potential pathogens. And if you have any doubts about whether food is safe to eat, err on the side of caution. A missed meal is better than a debilitating illness. Let's talk about supplementing your scavenged food supplies. If you're in a relatively stable location, consider starting a small garden. Even a few pots of herbs or vegetables can provide valuable fresh nutrients and add variety to your diet. Fast-growing crops like radishes, lettuce, and green onions can provide food in as little as a month. If you're in an area with wildlife, fishing and hunting can be valuable food sources. However, be cautious. The noise and movement involved in these activities can attract the infected. If you do hunt or fish, process your catch well away from your camp to avoid drawing unwanted attention. Foraging for wild edibles can also supplement your diet, but this requires careful knowledge. Many plants have poisonous lookalikes, and eating the wrong thing could be fatal. If you're not absolutely certain about a plant's identity and edibility, it's not worth the risk. Now, I want to touch on a difficult topic: pets. If you've managed to keep a pet with you through this crisis, you're facing some tough decisions. Pets require food and water, resources that are already scarce for humans. However, they can also provide companionship and, in some cases, practical benefits like hunting or guard duties. You'll need to weigh the costs and benefits carefully. If you do have pets, consider ways they can contribute to your survival. Dogs can be trained to alert you to approaching infected or other dangers. Cats can help control rodent populations, which is crucial for protecting your food supplies. Even smaller pets like rabbits could potentially be a source of meat if absolutely necessary, though I know that's a painful thought for many of us. Let's circle back to water for a moment. We've talked about purification and storage, but we should also discuss conservation. In our current world, every drop counts. Be mindful of your water usage. When washing, use the minimum amount necessary. Consider using gray water from washing or cooking for non-consumption purposes like watering plants. If you're in an area prone to dry spells, having a water storage system is. Large containers like rain barrels or even clean trash cans can store significant amounts of water. Just remember to keep them covered to prevent contamination and mosquito breeding. For those of you on the move, carrying water can be a challenge. Water is heavy, at about 8 pounds per gallon. If you're traveling, you'll need to balance your water needs with your ability to carry it. Collapsible water containers can be a good solution, allowing you to carry larger amounts of water when available without taking up much space when empty. Now, let's talk about some often overlooked food sources. Insects, while not appealing to many of us, can be a valuable source of protein. Many cultures around the world regularly eat insects, and in our current situation, we can't afford to be picky. Grasshoppers, crickets, and mealworms are all edible and relatively easy to catch or even farm. Seaweed is another often overlooked food source for those near the coast. Many types of seaweed are edible and highly nutritious, rich in iodine and other minerals. Just be sure to rinse it thoroughly in fresh water before eating to remove excess salt. Remember, in our post-outbreak world, we can't afford to waste anything. Use every part of your food sources. Vegetable scraps can be used to make broths. Bones from meat can be boiled multiple times to extract every bit of nutrition. Even eggshells can be crushed and added to garden soil as a calcium supplement for your plants. Lastly, I want to emphasize the importance of food and water discipline. In a group situation, it's crucial that everyone understands and follows the rules about rationing and water use. Tensions can run high when resources are scarce, and clear, fair guidelines can help prevent conflicts. Remember, your food and water management can mean the difference between life and death in our current world. Stay vigilant, stay resourceful, and above all, stay alive. This is Atlas, and you're listening to Station Beacon. We'll be back after a short break with more survival tips and updates on the infected situation. Stay tuned and stay safe out there. Welcome back to Station Beacon. This is Atlas, and we're here to address some of the questions we've received from our listeners about survival in this post-outbreak world. Remember, knowledge is power, and in our current situation, it could mean the difference between life and death. So let's dive into some of these crucial queries. First up, we have a question from a listener in the old downtown area. They ask, "I've been hearing strange noises at night, almost like the infected are communicating. Is this possible, or am I just paranoid?" This is an excellent question, and it touches on something we've been hearing from multiple sources. While we don't have any concrete evidence of the infected developing language or complex communication, there have been reports of them making more varied vocalizations than in the early days of the outbreak. Some survivors have described hearing what sounds like coordinated howls or grunts, particularly when large groups of infected are on the move. It's possible that these sounds are a form of primitive communication, perhaps used to alert others to the presence of potential prey or to coordinate their movements. However, it's important not to anthropomorphize the infected. They're not regaining their humanity or developing higher intelligence. These vocalizations are likely an instinctive behavior driven by the virus, much like how wolves howl to communicate with their pack. That being said, these sounds can be useful to us. If you start hearing unusual vocalizations from the infected, it could be a warning sign that a large group is nearby or on the move. Use this information to your advantage. Increase your vigilance, secure your shelter, and be prepared to move if necessary. Our next question comes from a group of survivors who've set up a base in an old school building. They ask, "We've been using the school's science lab to try and purify water, but we're running low on supplies. Are there any household chemicals we can use safely?" This is a critical question, as clean water is essential for survival. While it's always best to use purpose-made water purification methods like boiling or purification tablets, there are some household chemicals that can be used in emergencies. Ordinary household bleach can be effective for water purification. Use 8 drops of plain bleach per gallon of water. Mix well and let it stand for 30 minutes before drinking. It's crucial to use only plain bleach without any additives or scents. Iodine can also be used, though it's less common in households. If you have access to iodine tincture, use 5 drops per quart of clear water or 10 drops per quart of cloudy water. Let it stand for at least 30 minutes before drinking. Remember, these methods should be used only when safer options aren't available. They can have side effects if used long-term, and they don't remove chemical contaminants or parasites. If possible, combine chemical purification with filtration for better results. Moving on, we have a question about infected behavior. A listener asks, "I've noticed the infected seem to be more active on overcast days. Is this a real pattern or just coincidence?" This is an astute observation, and it's one that's been reported by several other survivor groups. While we don't have scientific confirmation, there does seem to be a correlation between cloud cover and infected activity levels. One theory is that the infected are sensitive to direct sunlight. On bright, sunny days, they might be less active to avoid the harsh light. Overcast conditions could allow them to move more freely without discomfort. Another possibility is that the cooler temperatures often associated with overcast days are more conducive to infected activity. We've observed that extreme heat seems to slow them down, so milder temperatures might increase their mobility. Whatever the reason, this pattern, if consistent, could be valuable information for survivors. On overcast days, consider increasing your security measures and being extra cautious when moving outside your shelter. Our next question relates to long-term survival. A listener asks, "We've been relying on scavenged food, but it's getting harder to find. How can we start producing our own food with limited resources?" This is a crucial question as we look towards sustainable survival. While scavenging can sustain us in the short term, producing our own food is essential for long-term survival. One of the easiest ways to start is with a small container garden. Even if you don't have access to land, you can grow food in buckets, old tubs, or any container that can hold soil. Fast-growing crops like lettuce, radishes, and green onions can provide food in as little as a month. If you have more space, consider starting a larger garden. Potatoes are an excellent crop for beginners. They're calorie-dense and can be grown from old sprouting potatoes you might find while scavenging. Just cut the potato into pieces, making sure each piece has at least one eye or sprout, and plant them in soil. For protein, consider raising small animals if you have the resources. Rabbits and chickens are relatively easy to care for and can provide both meat and eggs. However, be aware that animal husbandry requires additional resources and can attract both infected and other survivors if not managed carefully. If you're near a water source, fishing can be a sustainable food source. Learn to make simple fishing gear from scavenged materials. Even without traditional fishing rods, you can use techniques like trot lines or fish traps to catch food. Don't overlook alternative food sources. Many insects are edible and high in protein. Learning to identify edible plants in your area can also supplement your diet, but be absolutely certain of your identification before consuming any wild plants. Remember, transitioning to food production takes time and resources. Start small, learn as you go, and gradually expand your operations as you gain experience and resources. Our next question is about medical care. A listener asks, "We're running low on antibiotics. Are there any natural alternatives we can use?" This is a critical issue, as proper medical care can be the difference between life and death in our current world. While natural remedies should never be considered a full replacement for antibiotics, there are some natural substances with antimicrobial properties that can be useful for minor infections. Honey, particularly raw honey, has known antibacterial properties. It can be applied directly to wounds to help prevent infection. Garlic also has antimicrobial properties. Crushing garlic and applying it to wounds can help fight infection, though it may cause skin irritation in some people. Tea tree oil, if you can find it, has strong antimicrobial properties and can be used topically for skin infections. Echinacea is another plant with immune-boosting properties that might help fight off minor infections. However, I want to stress that these natural remedies are not replacements for antibiotics in cases of serious infection. They're best used for prevention or for very minor issues. Any deep wounds, signs of blood poisoning, or severe infections still require proper antibiotics if available. In the absence of antibiotics, maintaining strict hygiene is your best defense against infection. Keep wounds clean and covered. Wash your hands frequently if water allows, and be cautious about what you eat and drink. Next, we have a question about the infected. A listener asks, "We've noticed that loud noises seem to draw the infected from far away. How good is their hearing, really?" This is an excellent observation, and it's one that's been reported by many survivor groups. The infected do indeed seem to have heightened auditory sensitivity compared to humans. While we don't have exact measurements, reports suggest that the infected can hear sounds from significantly farther away than we can. Some survivors have reported infected individuals reacting to noises from up to a mile away under ideal conditions. This enhanced hearing is likely an adaptation driven by the virus to make the infected more efficient predators. It allows them to detect potential prey from great distances, especially in urban environments where sound can travel far. It is crucial to keep this in mind when moving around or setting up camp. Any unnecessary noise can draw the infected to your location. This includes not just obvious sounds like talking or running engines, but also things you might not think about like opening cans, rustling plastic bags, or even snoring. When you need to move, try to do so as quietly as possible. Soft-soled shoes, careful foot placement, and being mindful of your surroundings can help minimize noise. If you're in a group, develop hand signals for communication to avoid speaking out loud. If you need to use noisy equipment like power tools or vehicles, have a plan in place to deal with any infected that might be drawn to the sound. Consider having a separate team ready to deal with approaching infected while the main group works. On the flip side, you can use the infected's sensitive hearing to your advantage. Some survivors have reported success in using noisemakers to draw infected away from areas they want to explore. However, this is a risky strategy and should only be attempted with extreme caution. Our final question for this segment comes from a group that's been on the move. They ask, "We've been traveling at night to avoid the infected, but it's getting harder to find safe routes. Any advice?" Nighttime travel can indeed be safer in many cases, as we've observed that most infected are less active after dark. However, as our listener notes, it comes with its own set of challenges. First, always scout your route during daylight hours if possible. Look for potential obstacles, bottlenecks, or areas where infected might be hiding. Plan multiple routes in case your primary path is blocked. Use the moon phases to your advantage. Full moon nights provide better visibility, which can be both a blessing and a curse. You can see better, but you're also more visible to any infected or hostile survivors. On darker nights, consider using red light if you have access to it. Red light travels less far than white light and is less likely to attract attention. It also helps preserve your night vision. Always have a designated navigator in your group. This person should focus solely on guiding the group, using landmarks, stars, or a compass to stay on course. Rotate this role to prevent fatigue. Be extra cautious around dawn and dusk. We've had reports of increased infected activity during these transition periods, possibly due to changing light levels stimulating their senses. Remember, while night travel can be safer from the infected, it increases other risks like accidents or encounters with nocturnal wildlife. Always weigh the risks and benefits before deciding to move at night. That's all the time we have for questions in this segment. Remember, knowledge is our greatest weapon in this new world. Keep sending in your questions. and we'll do our best to provide answers and advice. Stay safe out there, and keep listening to Station Beacon. We'll be back soon with more updates on infected activity and survival strategies. This is Atlas, signing off for now. Welcome back to Station Beacon. This is Atlas, and it's time for our medical update on the virus. As always, I want to stress that this information comes from observations and reports from survivors, not from controlled scientific studies. In our current situation, we have to work with the data we have, imperfect as it may be. Let's start with what we know about the virus itself. As we've discussed before, it's spread primarily through bodily fluids, with saliva and blood being the most common vectors. The incubation period seems to be around 12 hours, though we've had reports of it ranging from 6 to 24 hours in some cases. The initial symptoms are often mistaken for a severe flu, high fever, body aches, extreme fatigue. However, unlike the flu, these symptoms progress rapidly. Within hours of the first symptoms appearing, infected individuals typically experience severe cognitive decline. They become confused, aggressive, and lose the ability to communicate coherently. As the infection progresses, we see physical changes as well. The infected often develop a distinctive pallor, with visible veins near the surface of the skin. Their eyes become bloodshot, and in later stages, we've observed changes in eye color, typically to a milky white or pale yellow. One of the most disturbing aspects of the infection is the apparent loss of pain sensation. Infected individuals have been observed continuing to move and attack even with injuries that would incapacitate or kill an uninfected person. This makes them incredibly dangerous in combat situations. Now, let's talk about some new observations that have been reported. We've received multiple accounts of infected individuals showing signs of improved physical capabilities. This includes increased speed, strength, and endurance. Some survivors have reported infected running at speeds comparable to Olympic sprinters, or lifting objects that would require several uninfected people to move. These enhanced capabilities seem to come at a cost, however. The infected appear to have an incredibly high metabolism. They need to consume large amounts of food to sustain their activity levels. When food is scarce, we've observed infected becoming lethargic and less aggressive, though still extremely dangerous if approached. Another interesting development is the apparent improvement in the infected's sensory capabilities. As we discussed earlier, their hearing seems to be significantly enhanced, but we're also getting reports of improved visual acuity, especially in low-light conditions, and an enhanced sense of smell. This heightened sense of smell is particularly concerning. Several survivor groups have reported infected individuals tracking them over long distances, apparently following their scent. This makes it even more crucial to practice good hygiene and use scent masking techniques when moving through infected heavy areas. Now, I want to address a rumor that's been circulating. Some of you have asked about reports of infected individuals showing signs of retained memories or recognition of people they knew before infection. I want to be very clear about this. We have no verified reports of infected retaining any aspect of their pre-infection personality or memories. What we have observed is that the infected sometimes appear to be drawn to locations that were significant to them in their pre-infected life. This could be their homes, workplaces, or other frequently visited locations. However, this appears to be more of an instinctive behavior rather than a sign of retained memories. The infected do not show any signs of recognition or emotional connection to these places. Let's move on to discussing potential treatments or cures. I know this is a topic that's on everyone's mind, and I wish I had better news to report. The truth is, we still have no verified cases of anyone recovering from the infection once symptoms have begun to manifest. There have been unconfirmed reports of individuals who were exposed to the virus but never developed symptoms. This suggests that some people might have a natural immunity. However, we have no way to identify these individuals before exposure, and deliberately exposing yourself to the virus to test for immunity would be incredibly dangerous. Some survivor groups have experimented with various treatments, mostly using scavenged pharmaceuticals or traditional herbal remedies. While some have reported limited success in slowing the progression of the disease, none have been able to stop or reverse it entirely. There is a persistent rumor about a secret government or military research facility working on a cure. While it's certainly possible that such research is ongoing, We have no concrete evidence of its existence or any breakthroughs. If you hear claims about miracle cures or secret treatments, approach them with extreme skepticism. Now, let's talk about prevention. Given the lack of effective treatments, preventing infection in the first place is absolutely crucial. The most important rule is to avoid any contact with infected individuals or their bodily fluids. Even a small scratch or splash of infected blood can be enough to transmit the virus. When moving through areas where you might encounter the infected, cover as much of your skin as possible. Wear long sleeves, long pants, and closed-toe shoes. If you can find them, protective goggles and face masks can provide additional protection. If you do come into contact with infected bodily fluids, immediate decontamination is critical. Wash the affected area thoroughly with soap and water if available. In the absence of soap, use alcohol-based sanitizers or even strong alcoholic beverages to clean the area. Remember, the virus can enter through any mucous membrane, so be especially careful to avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth after potential exposure. For those of you in relatively stable locations, consider setting up decontamination stations at the entrances to your shelters. This could be as simple as a bucket of diluted bleach solution to step in, or a more complex setup with separate areas for removing potentially contaminated clothing and cleaning up. Let's discuss the psychological aspects of the infection. The rapid cognitive decline experienced by infected individuals is one of the most terrifying aspects of this disease. Within hours of the first symptoms, people lose the ability to communicate or reason. They become driven solely by the need to spread the infection. This creates an incredibly difficult situation when a member of your group becomes infected. The person you knew is, for all intents and purposes, gone long before their body stops moving. It is crucial to accept this reality. Hesitation or misplaced hope can lead to more infections. If someone in your group shows signs of infection, you need to isolate them immediately. Have a plan in place for this scenario. Designate a secure area for quarantine and make sure everyone knows the protocol. It is a harsh reality, but in our current situation, the safety of the group has to come before any individual. Now, I want to touch on a topic that many of you have asked about: animals and the virus. From what we've observed, the virus appears to be specific to humans. We haven't seen any cases of animals becoming infected or showing symptoms similar to infected humans. However, this doesn't mean animals are completely unaffected. We've had reports of animals, particularly domesticated ones, behaving strangely around infected individuals. Dogs especially seem to be able to sense the infection, often becoming agitated or aggressive towards infected people even before they show symptoms. This behavior in animals could potentially be used as an early warning system. If you have dogs in your group and they suddenly become upset or aggressive towards a person for no apparent reason, it might be worth isolating that individual and watching closely for symptoms. While animals don't seem to become infected themselves, they can still potentially spread the virus. An animal that has been in contact with an infected person or contaminated area could carry the virus on their fur or paws. If you're interacting with animals, especially strays or wildlife, take precautions to avoid potential contamination. Let's talk about the long-term implications of the virus. One of the most concerning aspects is its apparent ability to mutate and adapt. We've seen changes in infected behavior and capabilities over time, which suggests the virus is evolving. This evolution could make the infected even more dangerous over time. It also complicates efforts to develop treatments or vaccines. Any potential cure would need to be effective against not just the original strain of the virus, but also its mutations. On a more positive note, this evolution could potentially work in our favor. There's a theory in epidemiology that viruses often evolve to become less lethal over time. The idea is that a virus that kills its host too quickly limits its own ability to spread. If this holds true for our virus, we might eventually see a less aggressive form emerge. However, I want to stress that this is just a theory. We can't count on the virus becoming less dangerous on its own. We need to remain vigilant and continue our efforts to survive and find a cure. Now, I want to address a question that many of you have asked. Is it possible that some infected individuals might recover on their own? While we have no confirmed cases of this happening, the possibility can't be completely ruled out. The human immune system is incredibly complex and resilient. It's possible that in rare cases, an individual's immune system might be able to fight off the infection. However, given the rapid progression of the disease and the extensive damage it causes to the brain and body, any such recovery would likely be partial at best. If you encounter an individual who appears to be recovering from infection, exercise extreme caution. Isolate them immediately and observe them closely for an extended period. Remember, we've seen cases of infected individuals appearing to be dormant or less aggressive when food is scarce. Don't mistake this state for recovery. As we wrap up this medical update, I want to remind everyone of the importance of sharing information. If you observe new symptoms, changes in infected behavior, or have any success with treatments, find a way to spread that knowledge. In our current world, information can be just as valuable as food or water. Remember, while the situation may seem hopeless at times, humanity has faced and overcome pandemics before. We are resilient, we are adaptable, and together, we will find a way through this crisis. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and keep listening to Station Beacon. We'll be back soon with more updates and survival tips. This is Atlas, reminding you that in knowledge lies our best hope for survival. In our next segment, we're going to discuss DIY weapons and tools. In this new world, we often have to make do with what we can find or create ourselves. Remember, while weapons can be crucial for survival, they should always be a last resort. Your primary goal should always be to avoid confrontation with the infected or hostile survivors. Let's start with melee weapons. These are often easier to create and maintain than firearms, and they have the advantage of being silent. One of the simplest and most effective melee weapons is the spear. You can make a basic spear by attaching a knife or sharpened piece of metal to the end of a long, sturdy stick. This gives you reach, which is crucial when dealing with the infected. Remember, the closer you are, the greater the risk of exposure to infected bodily fluids. Another effective melee weapon is the club. Look for a piece of hardwood about the length of your arm. Baseball bats are ideal if you can find them, but any sturdy piece of wood can work. You can improve its effectiveness by driving nails through one end, creating a makeshift mace. Just be cautious, as this can increase the risk of splatter if you strike an infected. For those of you with metalworking skills, you might consider creating a weapon similar to a medieval warhammer. This can be done by attaching a heavy piece of metal to the end of a sturdy handle. The blunt force trauma from such a weapon can incapacitate an infected without the risk of splatter associated with bladed weapons. Speaking of bladed weapons, while they can be effective, they come with increased risk. Any cut that draws blood puts you at risk of infection. If you do use bladed weapons, prioritize chopping or slashing motions over stabbing. This reduces the risk of the weapon getting stuck and minimizes your exposure to infected blood. Now, let's talk about ranged weapons. Firearms are obviously effective, but ammunition is becoming increasingly scarce. If you do have firearms, use them sparingly and only when absolutely necessary. The noise can attract more infected or hostile survivors. A quieter alternative is the bow and arrow. With some practice, a bow can be an effective weapon against both infected and for hunting. You can make a simple bow from a flexible piece of wood and some strong cord. Arrows can be crafted from straight branches, with arrowheads made from sharpened metal or even knapped stone if you have the skill. Slingshots are another option that shouldn't be overlooked. They're easy to make and the ammunition, small rocks, is plentiful. While not as powerful as other weapons, a well-aimed shot can still incapacitate an infected or small game for hunting. For those of you with access to hardware stores or construction sites, consider crafting a nail gun into a weapon. These can be powerful and relatively quiet. Just be aware that they're short range and you'll need to aim carefully. Now, let's move on to defensive tools. Creating effective barriers can be just as important as having weapons. For barricading doors and windows, hammer nails through boards at various angles. When placed across a door or window, these nail boards make it much harder for the infected to push through. Tripwires are another useful defensive tool. These can be set up around your perimeter to alert you to approaching threats. Use sturdy wire or cord and attach it to noisemakers like cans filled with pebbles. Just make sure everyone in your group knows where these are set up to avoid false alarms. For those of you in urban environments, consider creating mobile barricades. Shopping carts can be reinforced with wooden boards to create movable walls. These can be quickly deployed to block off areas or create defensive corridors. Let's talk about tools for daily survival. A multi-tool is invaluable if you can find one, but you can also create specialized tools for specific tasks. For example, you can make a simple can opener by driving a nail through a piece of wood at an angle. This can pierce can lids, allowing you to pry them open. For fire starting, create a bow drill. This consists of a flexible piece of wood bent into a bow shape, with a string or cord attached at both ends. This is used to rapidly spin a wooden spindle against a fireboard, creating friction to start a fire. It takes practice, but it's a reliable method when matches and lighters run out. Water is crucial for survival, and creating water filtration systems can be life-saving. A simple filter can be made by layering gravel, sand, and charcoal in a container with small holes in the bottom. This won't purify water, but it can remove larger contaminants before boiling. For those of you trying to grow food, you can create simple irrigation systems using scavenged materials. Plastic bottles with small holes punched in them can be buried next to plants, allowing for slow, directed watering. This conserves water and can help your plants thrive even in dry conditions. Now, let's discuss tools for scavenging and exploration. A grappling hook can be invaluable for accessing upper floors of buildings when stairs are blocked or too dangerous. You can make a simple one by tying sturdy rope to a curved piece of metal or even a tree branch with smaller branches attached to form hooks. For breaking into locked areas, learn to make and use a simple lock pick set. Basic picks can be crafted from sturdy pieces of metal like bobby pins or thin wires. This skill can give you access to areas that might still contain valuable supplies. Creating light sources is another crucial skill. While batteries will eventually run out, you can make simple oil lamps using containers filled with vegetable oil or animal fat, with a wick made from twisted cloth. These can provide light for hours and can be easily refilled. For carrying supplies, learn to make a sturdy backpack from scavenged materials. A simple frame can be constructed from sturdy branches, with cloth or tarp forming the bag. This allows you to transport more supplies than you could carry in your arms, which can be crucial during scavenging runs. Remember, in our new world, the ability to create and maintain tools is just as important as knowing how to use them. Always be on the lookout for materials that can be repurposed. Plastic, metal, wood, fabric, all of these can be valuable resources in the right hands. One often overlooked but incredibly useful skill is rope making. Strong cordage is used in so many aspects of survival, from shelter building to tool creation. Learn to make rope from natural fibers like plant stalks or even from unraveled synthetic fabrics. For medical emergencies, learn to create improvised stretchers. Two sturdy poles with a blanket or tarp secured between them can allow you to transport injured members of your group quickly and safely. In terms of shelter, beyond just finding existing structures, learn to reinforce and improve them. Simple techniques like creating sandbags from scavenged bags and soil can provide additional protection against both infected and potential hostile survivors. For those of you in colder climates, learning to create insulation is crucial. Stuffing clothing or tarps with dry leaves, paper, or any fibrous material can create effective insulating layers to protect against the cold. Now, I want to stress the importance of maintaining your tools and weapons. Even the best equipment will fail if not properly cared for. For metal tools and weapons, learn to remove rust and keep edges sharp. For wooden items, regularly check for cracks or splits and repair them before they become serious. One final note on weapons and tools. While it's important to be prepared, don't let the creation and maintenance of weapons consume all your time and resources. Balance is key. A well-fortified shelter, a stable food and water supply, and a strong, cohesive group are just as important for survival as any weapon. Remember, your mind is your most valuable tool. Stay alert, stay adaptable, and never stop learning. Every day in this new world presents new challenges, but also new opportunities to expand your skills and knowledge. Stay safe out there, and keep listening to Station Beacon. We'll be back soon with more survival tips and updates on the infected situation. This is Atlas, reminding you that in our hands and our minds lie the keys to our survival. In our next segment, we'll be discussing mental health strategies for coping with the stress and isolation of our post-outbreak world. It's easy to focus solely on physical survival, but maintaining our mental and emotional well-being is just as crucial. So stay tuned, and remember, we're all in this together. Welcome back to Station Beacon. This is Atlas, and in this segment, we're going to tackle a crucial aspect of survival that often gets overlooked: mental health. In our post-outbreak world, the constant stress, fear, and isolation can take a severe toll on our psychological well-being. But maintaining good mental health isn't just about feeling better, it's about staying sharp, making good decisions, and ultimately, surviving. Let's start by acknowledging a simple truth. It's okay to not be okay. The world as we knew it has ended. We've all lost loved ones, homes, and the sense of security we once took for granted. Feeling grief, anger, and fear is not only normal, it's healthy. Suppressing these emotions can lead to more severe mental health issues down the line. That being said, we can't let these negative emotions consume us. We need to find ways to process our feelings without becoming overwhelmed by them. One effective method is journaling. If you have access to paper and writing materials, set aside some time each day to write down your thoughts and feelings. This can help you process your emotions and track your mental state over time. For those of you in groups, consider setting up regular sharing circles. These are meetings where everyone gets a chance to talk about how they're feeling without fear of judgment. It's important to establish ground rules for these sessions. No interrupting, no criticism, just listening and support. These circles can help build trust within your group and remind everyone that they're not alone in their struggles. Now, let's talk about the importance of routine. In our chaotic world, establishing a daily routine can provide a sense of normalcy and control. Try to wake up and go to sleep at consistent times. Set regular meal times. Assign daily tasks and stick to a schedule as much as possible. This structure can help combat the feeling of helplessness that often comes with our uncertain situation. Physical activity is another crucial aspect of maintaining good mental health. Regular exercise releases endorphins, which can improve mood and reduce stress. Even if you're in a confined space, you can do bodyweight exercises like push-ups, sit-ups, or yoga. If it's safe to do so, try to get outside for a walk or jog regularly. Just remember to stay alert and have an escape route planned. Mindfulness and meditation can be powerful tools for managing stress and anxiety. These practices involve focusing your attention on the present moment, acknowledging your thoughts and feelings without judgment. Even a few minutes of mindful breathing each day can help calm your mind and improve your overall well-being. For those of you dealing with loneliness and isolation, finding ways to connect with others is crucial. If you have access to working communication devices, set regular times to check in with other survivors. Even if it's just a brief radio call, maintaining these connections can provide a vital sense of community. If direct communication isn't possible, consider leaving messages for other survivors. This could be notes left in safe locations, or even graffiti if appropriate. Knowing that others are out there, fighting to survive just like you, can be incredibly reassuring. Now, let's address a difficult but important topic: survivor's guilt. Many of you may be struggling with feelings of guilt for surviving when others didn't. This is a common and normal reaction to trauma. Remember, your survival is not a betrayal of those who didn't make it. The best way to honor the memory of those we've lost is to keep fighting, to keep living. Another common issue in our post-outbreak world is hypervigilance. While staying alert is crucial for survival, being in a constant state of high alert can be exhausting and detrimental to your mental health. Try to create safe spaces where you can let your guard down, even if only for short periods. This might be a well-fortified room in your shelter, or a hidden spot that you've carefully secured. For those of you struggling with flashbacks or intrusive thoughts about traumatic events, grounding techniques can be helpful. When you feel yourself getting lost in these thoughts, try to focus on your immediate environment. Name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This can help bring you back to the present moment. Sleep disturbances are another common issue in our high-stress environment. Establishing a bedtime routine can help signal to your body that it's time to rest. If possible, create a comfortable sleeping area that's separate from your daytime living space. Avoid discussing stressful topics or planning scavenging missions right before bed. Instead, try to engage in calming activities like reading or gentle stretching. Now, let's talk about the importance of finding purpose and meaning in our new world. It's easy to fall into despair when faced with the enormity of our situation, but having a sense of purpose can provide powerful motivation to keep going. This could be as simple as being the person who keeps your group spirits up, or taking on the role of chronicling your experiences for future generations. Setting goals, both short term and long term, can also help provide a sense of progress and accomplishment. These don't have to be grand objectives. It could be learning a new skill, finishing a book, or improving your shelter. The act of working towards something, anything, can be incredibly beneficial for your mental state. For those of you with children in your groups, it's crucial to address their mental health as well. Children are resilient, but they're also deeply affected by the stress and trauma of our situation. Try to maintain as much normalcy as possible for them. If it's safe, set aside time for play. Continue their education as best you can. Answer their questions honestly, but in an age-appropriate way. Creativity can be a powerful tool for maintaining mental health. If you have access to art supplies, set aside time for drawing, painting, or crafting. If not, you can still engage in creative activities like storytelling, singing, or even creating art from scavenged materials. These activities not only provide a much-needed mental escape, but can also help process complex emotions. Now, let's address substance use. In times of high stress, it can be tempting to turn to alcohol or other substances for temporary relief. While this might provide short-term escape, it can lead to dependency and impair your ability to stay alert and make good decisions. If you find yourself relying to cope, try to find healthier alternatives. Talk to others in your group about your struggles. Remember, in our world, clear thinking can mean the difference between life and death. For those of you who had mental health conditions before the outbreak, maintaining your treatment as best you can is crucial. If you are on medication, ration it carefully and look for natural alternatives that might help manage your symptoms. If you were in therapy, try to remember and practice the coping strategies you learned. One often overlooked aspect of mental health is the importance of laughter and joy. In our grim reality, it might seem inappropriate to laugh or have fun, but finding moments of levity can be incredibly beneficial for our psychological well-being. Share jokes, play games if you can, celebrate small victories. These moments of lightness can provide crucial relief from the constant stress of survival. Now, let's talk about hope. Maintaining hope in our situation can be challenging, but it's absolutely vital. Hope gives us the strength to keep going when things seem darkest. Try to focus on the progress we've made. We've survived this long. We're learning, adapting, becoming stronger. Humanity has faced pandemics and disasters before, and we've always found a way through. This time is no different. Remember, every day that we survive is a victory. Every skill we learn, every connection we make with other survivors, brings us one step closer to rebuilding. It might not seem like it now, but there will be an after. Our job is to stay alive, stay sane, and be ready for that after when it comes. For those of you struggling with thoughts of giving up, I want you to know that you're not alone. Many of us have had moments where continuing seems impossible. In these dark times, try to focus on the immediate future. You don't have to figure out how to survive forever right now. Just focus on making it through today, then tomorrow, then the next day. Break it down into manageable pieces. If you're having thoughts of suicide, please reach out to others in your group. You are valuable. Your survival matters. The skills and knowledge you've gained are unique and irreplaceable. The world needs you. Now, let's discuss the importance of forgiveness, both of others and of yourself. In survival situations, people sometimes do things they never thought they were capable of. Carrying the weight of these actions can be incredibly damaging to your mental health. While we must learn from our mistakes, we can't let them define us. Practice self-compassion. Acknowledge that you're doing the best you can in an impossible situation. For those of you in leadership positions within your groups, it's crucial to address your own mental health. The weight of responsibility can be overwhelming. Make sure you're delegating tasks and not trying to shoulder everything yourself. Set aside time for your own mental health practices. Remember, you can't take care of others if you're not taking care of yourself. As we near the end of this segment, I want to emphasize again the importance of communication. So many mental health issues are exacerbated by silence and isolation. Talk to the people around you. Share your fears, your hopes, your struggles. Listen to theirs. We're all in this together, and sometimes simply knowing that you're not alone in your feelings can make all the difference. Remember, maintaining good mental health is not a luxury, it's a crucial survival skill. A clear, stable mind makes better decisions, reacts faster to threats, and is more likely to find creative solutions to problems. By taking care of your mental health, you're not just making your own survival more likely, you're contributing to the survival of your entire group. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and keep listening to Station Beacon. We'll be back soon with more updates and survival tips. This is Atlas, reminding you that even in the darkest times, the human spirit is resilient. We will endure, we will survive, and someday we will thrive again. In our next segment, we'll be discussing the latest observations on infected behavior. Understanding how the infected operate is crucial for our survival, so stay tuned. Knowledge is power, especially in our new world. Welcome back to Station Beacon. This is Atlas, and in this segment, we'll be diving deep into our latest observations on infected behavior. Understanding how the infected operate is crucial for our survival, so pay close attention. As always, this information comes from reports from various survivor groups and our own observations. While we strive for accuracy, remember that in our current situation, all information should be treated as potentially incomplete or subject to change. Let's start with the basics. The infected, as we've discussed before, are driven primarily by the need to spread the infection. They're not zombies in the traditional sense, they're still alive, and they still need food and water to survive. However, their cognitive functions have been severely impaired by the virus. They don't reason, plan, or communicate in any meaningful way, at least as far as we can tell. One of the most significant recent observations is the apparent improvement in the infected's sensory capabilities. Multiple survivor groups have reported that the infected seem to have enhanced hearing, sight, and smell. This makes them even more dangerous predators than before. Let's break this down further. In terms of hearing, the infected appear to be able to detect sounds from much greater distances than uninfected humans. Some reports suggest they can react to noises from up to a mile away under ideal conditions. This means that any unnecessary noise can potentially draw them to your location. When moving or scavenging, silence is more crucial than ever. Visual acuity among the infected also seems to have improved. They appear to be more sensitive to movement, even in low light conditions. This makes nighttime activities, which many survivors relied on for relative safety, more dangerous. If you need to move at night, stick to areas with plenty of cover and avoid open spaces whenever possible. Perhaps most concerning is the apparent enhancement of the infected sense of smell. We've received multiple reports of infected individuals tracking survivors over long distances, seemingly following their scent. This makes hygiene and scent masking techniques crucial when moving through areas with high infected activity. Now, let's talk about infected behavior patterns. We've observed some changes in their activity cycles. Previously, the infected seemed more active during daylight hours. However, recent reports indicate a shift towards increased nighttime activity, particularly in the hours just before dawn. This could be an adaptation to the changing seasons and shorter days, or it could be a more fundamental evolution in their behavior. We've also noticed changes in how the infected move and hunt. In the early days of the outbreak, they tended to wander aimlessly until they detected potential prey. Now, however, we're seeing signs of more directed movement. Infected individuals have been observed following paths of least resistance, using roads and cleared areas to move more efficiently. Even more concerning are the reports of what appears to be rudimentary pack behavior. While the infected don't seem to communicate or coordinate in any complex way, they do appear to be more likely to move and hunt in groups. These groups, or packs, can range from a handful of individuals to several dozen. This pack behavior makes them significantly more dangerous. A pack of infected can overwhelm defenses that might have been effective against individuals or smaller groups. If you encounter a pack, do not engage. Retreat immediately and find a secure location to wait them out. We've also received reports of infected exhibiting what might be described as ambush behavior. Survivors have described instances where infected individuals seem to lie in wait in hidden locations, only to spring out when potential prey passed nearby. This behavior has been observed particularly in urban environments, where there are plenty of hiding spots. Another interesting observation relates to the infected's reaction to different stimuli. They still appear to be primarily attracted to sound and movement. However, we've had reports of infected reacting strongly to certain smells. Smoke, in particular, seems to draw their attention. This could be because they associate it with the presence of uninfected humans. On the topic of fire, we've observed that the infected seem to have retained a fear response to large fires. They will generally avoid approaching large, active fires. This can be used to your advantage in creating defensive perimeters, but be cautious. The light and smoke from fires can also attract infected from a distance. Water continues to be an interesting factor in infected behavior. While they can traverse bodies of water if motivated, they seem to prefer to avoid it when possible. Some survivors have used this to their advantage, setting up bases on islands or peninsulas. However, don't rely on water as an absolute barrier. If the infected detect prey on the other side, they will eventually attempt to cross. Let's discuss the infected's feeding patterns. As we've mentioned before, they do need to eat to survive. However, their primary drive seems to be spreading the infection rather than feeding. They will attack and attempt to bite even when not apparently hungry. When they do feed, they seem to prefer fresh meat, but have been observed consuming almost anything organic when desperate. An important note on infected feeding behavior: they do not appear to attack or consume each other. This suggests that the virus has some mechanism for recognizing already infected individuals. Understanding this mechanism could be crucial in potential treatments or preventative measures. Now, let's talk about the physical capabilities of the infected. We've observed what appears to be enhanced strength and endurance compared to uninfected humans. Infected individuals have been seen performing feats of strength that would be impossible for a normal human, like breaking through solid wooden doors or lifting heavy objects. Their endurance is particularly noteworthy. Infected individuals can pursue prey for hours without showing signs of fatigue. They don't seem to feel pain or respond to injuries that would incapacitate an uninfected person. This makes them incredibly dangerous in prolonged encounters. However, this enhanced physical capability comes at a cost. The infected appear to have an extremely high metabolism. They need to consume large amounts of food to maintain their activity levels. When food is scarce, we've observed infected becoming lethargic and less aggressive, though still extremely dangerous if approached. We've also noticed that extreme temperatures seem to affect the infected more severely than they do uninfected humans. During recent heat waves, infected activity decreased significantly during the hottest parts of the day. Similarly, in areas experiencing unseasonably cold weather, the infected became more sluggish and less aggressive. This sensitivity to temperature could provide windows of opportunity for safer movement or scavenging during extreme weather conditions. However, it also means we need to be extra vigilant during mild weather when the infected are likely to be at their most active. Let's address a common question we receive. Do the infected retain any memories or recognition of their pre-infection lives? From all available evidence, the answer appears to be no. While infected individuals have been observed returning to locations that were significant in their pre-infected lives, like homes or workplaces, they show no signs of recognition or emotional connection to these places. This behavior seems to be more of an ingrained habit than a sign of retained memory. Another crucial aspect of infected behavior is their apparent lack of self-preservation instinct. They will pursue prey with single-minded determination, even to their own detriment. They've been observed walking into hazardous areas, off high ledges, or into dangerous situations that any uninfected human would avoid. This can sometimes be used to your advantage in escape situations, but it also makes their behavior highly unpredictable and dangerous. We've received reports of infected exhibiting what might be termed playing dead behavior. In situations where food is scarce, infected have been observed lying motionless for long periods, only to spring into action when potential prey approaches. This makes it crucial to approach any seemingly dead infected with extreme caution. Always assume an infected is active unless you're absolutely certain it's truly dead. Now, let's discuss how weather and environmental conditions affect infected behavior. We've already mentioned their sensitivity to extreme temperatures, but other weather conditions also seem to impact their activity. Heavy rain appears to disorient them, possibly by interfering with their enhanced senses. Strong winds can disperse scents, making it harder for them to track prey. However, these conditions can also mask the sounds of your movement, so always remain cautious. We've observed that infected seem to be drawn to areas of high human activity from the pre-outbreak world. Cities, towns, and other populated areas tend to have higher concentrations of infected. This is likely because these areas had the highest population density when the outbreak began. If you need to enter urban areas, be prepared for significantly increased infected activity. On a related note, we've had reports of infected concentrating around locations like hospitals, schools, and shopping centers. These locations likely saw high human traffic during the initial stages of the outbreak, leading to higher infection rates. Approach these areas with extreme caution if scavenging becomes necessary. Let's talk about the long-term implications of infected behavior. We've observed what appears to be a gradual evolution in their capabilities and behavior patterns. This suggests that the virus is continuing to adapt and change. While this is concerning, it also gives us hope. If the virus can change, it might eventually evolve into a less aggressive form. However, we can't count on this happening. We need to remain vigilant and continue adapting our own strategies. As we wrap up this segment on infected behavior, I want to stress the importance of continuing to share information. If you observe new behaviors or patterns among the infected, find a way to spread that knowledge. Our understanding of the infected is our best defense against them. Remember, while the infected are dangerous, they're not invincible. They don't plan, they don't use tools, and they don't learn in the way we do. Our ability to reason, to plan, and to adapt is our greatest advantage. Stay alert, stay cautious, and above all, stay human. Keep listening to Station Beacon for more updates and survival tips. This is Atlas, reminding you that knowledge is power, especially in our new world. Stay safe out there, and remember, we're all in this together. In our next segment, we'll be discussing strategies for building and maintaining survivor communities. The strength of human cooperation is one of our greatest assets in this crisis, so don't miss it. Welcome back to Station Beacon. This is Atlas, and in this segment, we'll be discussing strategies for building and maintaining survivor communities. In our post-outbreak world, the ability to work together isn't just beneficial, it's essential for long-term survival. Let's dive into some key aspects of creating and sustaining a successful survivor group. First and foremost, let's talk about the importance of clear leadership and organization. Every group, no matter how small, needs some form of leadership structure. This doesn't mean establishing a dictatorship, but rather creating a system where decisions can be made efficiently and responsibilities are clearly defined. In smaller groups, a simple democratic system often works well. For larger communities, you might need a more complex structure with different people responsible for specific areas like security, food production, and medical care. Whatever system you choose, make sure it's clear to everyone and that there's a process for addressing conflicts or disagreements. Communication is absolutely crucial in a survivor community. Establish regular meetings where everyone can share information, voice concerns, and contribute ideas. In between these meetings, have a system for spreading important news quickly. This could be as simple as a designated message board in a central location. When it comes to accepting new members into your community, caution is key. While growing your numbers can provide more security and resources, it also increases the risk of bringing in someone who's infected or who might have malicious intentions. Establish a quarantine protocol for new arrivals. This should include a period of isolation to ensure they're not infected, as well as a process for vetting their skills and background. Speaking of skills, one of the most important aspects of building a strong community is identifying and utilizing each member's strengths. Take inventory of everyone's skills and experiences. You might be surprised at how valuable seemingly ordinary skills can be in our new world. A former gardener could be crucial for establishing food production. Someone with construction experience could be invaluable in fortifying your shelter. Encourage skill sharing within your community. Set up a system where people can teach others their skills. This not only increases the overall capability of your group, but also provides a sense of purpose and contribution for each member. Now, let's talk about the importance of establishing and maintaining routines. In our chaotic world, having a sense of normalcy can be incredibly beneficial for mental health. Set regular times for meals, work shifts, and community activities. If you have children in your group, try to establish some form of schooling or structured learning time. Security is obviously a major concern for any survivor community. Establish clear protocols for perimeter watches, entry and exit procedures, and responses to various threats. Everyone in the community should understand these protocols and their role in maintaining security. Consider setting up a system of safe houses or rally points outside your main base. These can be crucial if your primary location is compromised. Make sure everyone knows the locations of these safe houses and the procedures for regrouping if separated. Food and water management is another critical aspect of maintaining a survivor community. If possible, start working towards sustainable food production as soon as you can. This could involve gardening, small-scale farming, or even aquaponics if you have the resources and expertise. Establish clear rules about food consumption and rationing. In times of scarcity, tensions can run high over food distribution. Having a fair and transparent system can help prevent conflicts. Water is arguably even more important than food. If you don't have access to a clean natural water source, prioritize setting up rainwater collection systems. Assign responsibility for water purification and distribution to trusted members of your community. Medical care is another crucial consideration. Identify anyone with medical training and put them in charge of health-related issues. Start building up a stock of medical supplies whenever possible. Also, focus on preventative measures. Enforce strict hygiene protocols to prevent virus-related illnesses, which can be just as dangerous in our current situation. Let's talk about the importance of maintaining morale in your community. Surviving isn't just about meeting physical needs, it's also about preserving our humanity and finding reasons to keep going. Encourage activities that bring people together and provide a sense of normalcy. This could be anything from communal meals to game nights to religious or spiritual gatherings for those who are inclined. Celebrate victories, no matter how small. Successfully completing a dangerous scavenging mission, a good harvest from your garden, or even just making it through another week, these are all achievements worth recognizing. These celebrations can help bond your community and provide much-needed moments of joy. Now, let's address a difficult but necessary topic: how to handle conflicts within your community. In high-stress situations, disagreements are inevitable. Establish a clear process for resolving disputes. This could involve mediation by community leaders or a system where the whole group votes on major decisions. Be prepared to deal with members who consistently cause problems or refuse to contribute. As harsh as it may seem, having a process for removing individuals from the group might be necessary for the safety and cohesion of the community as a whole. Long-term planning is another crucial aspect of building a successful survivor community. While day-to-day survival is obviously the priority, it's important to have goals to work towards. This could involve plans for expanding your shelter, establishing trade with other survivor groups, or working towards more ambitious projects like generating electricity or creating more advanced weapons and tools. These long-term goals can provide hope and a sense of progress, which are vital for maintaining morale. They also help ensure that your community continues to develop and improve its chances of long-term survival. Let's discuss the importance of education in your community, particularly if you have children or young adults. While traditional schooling might seem irrelevant in our new world, education is more important than ever. Focus on practical skills like first aid, gardening, and basic engineering, but don't neglect more traditional subjects. Reading, writing, and math are still crucial skills. Moreover, preserving knowledge of history, science, and culture is important for the future rebuilding of society. For adult education, consider setting up a skill-sharing system where community members take turns teaching their areas of expertise to others. This not only improves the overall capability of your group, but also provides a sense of purpose and value for each member. Now, let's talk about the potential for trade and cooperation with other survivor groups. While caution is always necessary when dealing with outsiders, establishing friendly relations with neighboring communities can be incredibly beneficial. It allows for the exchange of resources, information, and skills. If you do establish trade relationships, start small. Exchange easily divisible goods or information before moving on to larger trades. Always conduct trades in neutral territory and have clear protocols for these interactions to ensure the safety of your community members. In terms of defense, consider the possibility of mutual aid agreements with trusted neighboring groups. Having allies you can call on in times of extreme danger can be a lifesaver. Just make sure any such agreements are clear and fair to all parties involved. Let's address the issue of justice and rule of law within your community. In our post-outbreak world, the old systems of law enforcement and justice no longer exist. However, having a clear set of rules and consequences for breaking them is crucial for maintaining order and safety in your group. Establish a basic code of conduct that all community members agree to follow. This should cover issues like resource distribution, work responsibilities, and personal conduct. Also, create a fair process for judging violations of this code and determining appropriate consequences. Remember, the goal of any justice system in your community should be to maintain order and safety, not to punish. Focus on rehabilitation and reintegration when possible, but also be prepared to make tough decisions if an individual consistently threatens the safety or stability of the group. Now, let's talk about the importance of record keeping. In our current world, it might seem unnecessary, but maintaining records can be crucial for several reasons. Keeping track of resources, monitoring health trends in your community, and documenting your group's history can all be incredibly valuable. Assign the task of record keeping to detail-oriented members of your group. Keep track of things like food and water supplies, medical issues, security incidents, and any significant events or decisions in your community. This information can help you make better decisions and can be invaluable for future planning. Additionally, consider keeping a broader record of your experiences and observations about the post-outbreak world. This could be crucial information for eventual efforts to rebuild society or develop a cure for the virus. Let's discuss the psychological aspects of building a community. In our high-stress world, maintaining mental health is just as important as physical health. Foster an environment where people feel safe expressing their fears and concerns. Consider establishing support groups or designating certain members as mental health resources if you have anyone with relevant experience. Encourage activities that promote mental well-being. This could include exercise routines, meditation sessions, or creative pursuits like art or music. These not only help individual mental health, but can also strengthen community bonds. Now, let's talk about children in your community. If you have young people in your group, it's crucial to provide them with some sense of normalcy and hope for the future. Designate safe play areas if possible. Encourage education and skill development, but also make sure they have time to just be kids. Involve older children and teenagers in community responsibilities. This can help them feel valued and give them a sense of purpose. However, be mindful of not putting too much pressure on young people. They're dealing with the trauma of our new world just like adults, often with fewer coping mechanisms. Let's address the issue of group size. While there's no perfect number, the size of your community can significantly impact its dynamics and sustainability. Smaller groups can be more mobile and require fewer resources, but they're also more vulnerable and have a smaller skill pool to draw from. Larger groups provide more security and diverse skills, but require more resources and complex organization. Consider your resources, location, and long-term goals when deciding whether to expand your group. Growth should be purposeful and manageable, not haphazard. As we wrap up this segment on building survivor communities, remember that the greatest strength of humanity has always been our ability to work together. In facing this crisis, we're not just fighting for individual survival, but for the survival of our species and our way of life. Stay strong, stay united, and keep listening to Station Beacon. We'll be back soon with more updates and survival tips. This is Atlas, reminding you that together, we are stronger than any virus. We will endure, we will rebuild, and someday we will thrive again. In our next segment, we'll be discussing long-term survival strategies, including sustainable food production and energy generation. The key to our future lies in becoming self-sufficient, so don't miss it. Welcome back to Station Beacon. This is Atlas, and in this segment, we'll be diving into long-term survival strategies. While day-to-day survival is obviously crucial, planning for the future is what will ultimately ensure the continuation of our species. Let's explore some key aspects of long-term survival, focusing on sustainable food production, energy generation, and other essential factors for rebuilding our world. Let's start with one of the most fundamental needs: food production. Scavenging can sustain us in the short term, but for long-term survival, we need to establish reliable food sources. If you haven't already, it's time to start thinking about agriculture. For those of you in urban or suburban areas, container gardening can be an excellent starting point. You can grow a surprising amount of food in buckets, old bathtubs, or any container that can hold soil. Focus on fast-growing, nutrient-dense crops like leafy greens, tomatoes, and beans. Vertical gardening techniques can help maximize your yield in limited spaces. If you have access to more land, consider establishing a larger garden or small-scale farm. Potatoes are an excellent crop for beginners. They're calorie-dense and can be grown from sprouted potatoes you might find while scavenging. Other staple crops to consider include corn, wheat, and squash. Don't overlook the potential of perennial food sources. Fruit trees and berry bushes can provide food for years with relatively little maintenance. If you're in an area with a suitable climate, consider planting nut trees as well. These can provide a valuable source of protein and healthy fats. For those near water sources, fishing can be a sustainable food source. Learn to make fishing gear from scavenged materials. Even without traditional rods, you can use techniques like trot lines or fish traps to catch food. If conditions allow, consider setting up a small-scale aquaculture system. This can provide a reliable source of protein with relatively low input once established. Now, let's talk about livestock. While large animals like cows might be impractical in many, smaller animals can be manageable and highly beneficial. Chickens are an excellent choice. They provide both meat and eggs and can be fed on kitchen scraps and foraged materials. Rabbits are another good option, as they reproduce quickly and can be raised in small spaces. If you have more space and resources, goats can be a valuable addition to your food production system. They can provide milk and meat and are able to eat a wide variety of vegetation. Just be sure to have secure fencing. Goats are notorious escape artists. Remember, any livestock you keep will require protection from both the infected and other potential predators. Factor this into your security planning. Let's move on to water, perhaps the most critical resource for long-term survival. If you don't have access to a clean natural water source, establishing a rainwater collection system should be a top priority. Even in drier climates, you'd be surprised how much water you can collect from rooftops and other surfaces. For purifying water, consider setting up a solar still. This can be as simple as a hole in the ground covered with plastic, or more complex setups for larger scale purification. If you have the materials, sand and charcoal filtration systems can also be effective for removing contaminants. Now, let's discuss energy production. While it's possible to survive without electricity, having a power source can dramatically improve your quality of life and open up many possibilities for long-term sustainability. Solar power is often the most accessible option for small-scale electricity generation. If you can scavenge solar panels and batteries, you can set up a basic system to power essential equipment. Even small solar setups can be used to charge batteries for flashlights, radios, and other crucial devices. For those with technical skills, small-scale wind turbines can be constructed from scavenged materials. These can be particularly useful in areas with consistent wind. Hydroelectric power is another option if you're near a flowing water source, though this requires more complex engineering. Don't overlook the potential of human-powered energy generation. Bicycle generators, for instance, can be used to charge batteries or power small devices. This has the added benefit of providing exercise, which is important for both physical and mental health. For heating and cooking, rocket stoves are an efficient option that can be built with minimal materials. These stoves use small amounts of fuel very efficiently, which is crucial when wood or other combustibles might be scarce. Let's talk about shelter and infrastructure. While finding existing structures is often the easiest short-term solution, long-term survival might require constructing new buildings or significantly modifying existing ones. Learn about basic construction techniques using available materials. Earthbag construction, for instance, can create sturdy structures using mostly soil and scavenged bags. Recycled materials like tires, bottles, and cans can also be used in construction. Consider the climate in your area when planning long-term shelter. In cold climates, focus on insulation and heat retention. In hot areas, prioritize ventilation and cooling. Passive solar design principles can help create comfortable living spaces with minimal energy input. Now, let's address the crucial topic of medical care. In the long term, we can't rely on scavenged pharmaceuticals. Start learning about medicinal plants in your area. Establish a medicinal herb garden if possible. Plants like echinacea, garlic, and aloe vera can be valuable for treating common ailments. Develop your first aid and emergency medical skills as much as possible. If you have anyone with medical training in your group, have them teach others. The more people who have these skills, the better your chances of long-term survival. Let's talk about transportation. While fuel will eventually become scarce or unusable, transportation remains important for trade, exploration, and relocating if necessary. Bicycles are an excellent long-term transportation option. They're efficient, can carry a decent amount of cargo, and can be maintained with relatively simple tools and scavenged parts. For water transportation, learning to build simple boats can be valuable. Canoes or rafts can be constructed from a variety of materials and can open up new areas for resources and trade. Now, let's discuss the importance of tools and technology. Our ability to create and use tools is what sets us apart from the infected. Prioritize learning and teaching basic tool-making skills. Metalworking, woodworking, and pottery are all valuable skills for creating essential items. If you have the skills and resources, consider setting up a small forge. The ability to work metal can be incredibly valuable for creating and repairing tools, weapons, and other essential items. Don't neglect the importance of record keeping and preserving knowledge. Establish a library of useful books if possible. Technical manuals, medical texts, and books on agriculture and survival skills can be invaluable resources. Consider assigning someone the task of recording your group's experiences and discoveries. This knowledge could be crucial for future generations. Let's talk about clothing and textiles. Eventually, scavenged clothing will wear out. Learning to make and repair clothing is an essential long-term skill. If you have the resources, consider keeping sheep or alpacas for wool. Otherwise, learn about plant fibers that can be used for textiles. Tanning animal hides is another valuable skill for producing durable materials for clothing and other uses. It's a complex process, but the resulting leather can be essential for everything from shoes to protective gear. Now, let's address the psychological aspects of long-term survival. Maintaining hope and a sense of purpose is crucial. Encourage your group to think beyond mere survival. What kind of world do you want to rebuild? Having long-term goals and a vision for the future can provide powerful motivation. Preserve and create culture. Music, art, storytelling. These aren't luxuries. They're essential parts of what makes us human. Encourage creative expression in your community. It can provide much-needed emotional outlets and help maintain morale. Education is another crucial aspect of long-term survival. If you have children in your group, establishing some form of schooling is important. But don't neglect adult education. Continuous learning and skill development should be encouraged for everyone. Let's talk about governance and law. As your community grows and stabilizes, you'll need to establish more formal systems for decision-making and conflict resolution. Learn from history, but don't be afraid to create new systems that work for your specific situation. Consider establishing trade networks with other survivor groups if possible. Trade can provide access to resources and skills you might not have in your own community. Start small and build trust slowly. Having allies can significantly improve your long-term prospects. Now, let's discuss defense and security. While we all hope for a peaceful future, the reality is that defense will remain a crucial concern for the foreseeable future. Establish clear protocols for perimeter defense, train your community in combat skills, and always have contingency plans. However, don't let fear drive you to cruelty or abandoning your humanity. The goal of security should be to protect and preserve, not to dominate or destroy. Remember, how we act in these difficult times will shape the world we rebuild. As we look to the long-term future, we must also consider the possibility of eventually eradicating or controlling the virus. While we might not have the resources for advanced research now, gathering and preserving information about the virus and its effects could be crucial for future efforts to develop a cure. Observe and record any changes in infected behavior. If you encounter areas where the infection seems less prevalent, make note of any unique characteristics of these locations. Any information could potentially be valuable. Let's talk about environmental awareness. In our struggle for survival, we must be careful not to destroy the very things we need to live. Practice sustainable hunting and gathering. Be mindful of waste and pollution. The healthier we keep our environment, the better our chances for long-term survival. As we wrap up this segment on long-term survival strategies, I want to emphasize the importance of adaptability. The world has changed, and it will likely continue to change. Our greatest strength is our ability to learn, to innovate, and to adapt to new challenges. Remember, every day that we survive, every skill we learn, every child born and raised in our new world is a victory. We're not just surviving, we're laying the groundwork for a new civilization. It may be different from the world we knew before, but it's a world we're building together. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and keep listening to Station Beacon. We'll be back soon with more updates and survival tips. This is Atlas, reminding you that the future is not something that happens to us, it's something we create. Together, we will not just survive, we will thrive. In our next segment, we'll be discussing recent rumors and unconfirmed reports from around the region. While we always strive for accuracy, sometimes sharing unverified information can lead to important discoveries. Stay tuned, and remember to approach all information with a critical mind. Welcome back to Station Beacon. This is Atlas, and in this segment, we'll be discussing some of the rumors and unconfirmed reports we've been hearing from around the region. Now, I want to stress that these are unverified stories. We're sharing them not as fact, but because in our current situation, even information can be valuable. It might provide clues, inspire ideas, or lead to important discoveries. As always, approach this information with a critical mind and use your judgment. Let's start with a persistent rumor we've been hearing from multiple sources. There are whispers of a large, well-organized survivor community supposedly located in an old military base about 100 miles to the north. According to these reports, this community has managed to restore some level of technology, including radio communications and even some vehicles. Now, we haven't been able to confirm this information or make direct contact with this supposed community. However, the consistency of the reports from different sources makes it worth considering. If true, this could be a significant development. A well-equipped, organized community could be a valuable ally or potentially a serious threat, depending on their intentions. For those of you in the northern areas, keep an eye out for any signs of organized activity. Unusual vehicle movements, radio signals on military frequencies, or groups of well-equipped individuals could all be indicators. But remember, approach any new group with extreme caution. We've all heard stories of seemingly friendly communities that turned out to have darker intentions. Moving on, we've received several reports of unusual infected behavior in the eastern forest region. Multiple survivor groups have described seeing infected individuals apparently working together to create crude shelters. These shelters are reportedly nothing more than simple lean-tos made from branches and debris. But if true, this would represent a significant evolution in infected behavior. We've discussed before how the infected seem to be developing more complex behaviors over time, but this level of coordination would be unprecedented. It's possible that these reports are the result of misunderstandings or survivors mistaking the actions of other survivor groups for infected activity. However, if there's any truth to these stories, it could indicate a dangerous new phase of the outbreak. For those of you near the eastern forests, please be extra vigilant. If you observe any unusual infected behavior, especially anything that looks like coordinated activity, retreat immediately and find a way to report your observations if possible. Do not attempt to investigate closely, these situations are extremely dangerous. Now, let's discuss a more hopeful rumor that's been circulating. We've heard from several sources about a possible breakthrough in virus resistance. According to these stories, there's a small community of survivors who seem to be immune to the virus. They can allegedly move among the infected without being attacked and have even survived bites without turning. I want to be very clear here. We have no concrete evidence that this is true. Could easily be exaggerated stories or even complete fabrication. However, if there's even a grain of truth to it, this could be incredibly significant. Understanding why some people might be immune could be the key to developing a cure or vaccine. The reports place this immune community somewhere in the mountains to the west. If any of you are in that region and have any information about this, please find a way to let us know. But do not, I repeat, do not attempt to deliberately expose yourself to the virus to test for immunity. The risk is far too great. Let's move on to another interesting report we've received. A group of survivors who recently passed through the old industrial district claim to have seen lights and heard machinery operating in one of the abandoned factories. They didn't approach closely, but they reported seeing movement inside and what looked like smoke from the chimneys. Now, this could simply be another survivor group that's managed to get some of the old equipment running. So, that's an impressive feat and could be a valuable resource. However, we can't rule out the possibility of it being something more dangerous. We've encountered hostile groups before who use functioning facilities as bait to lure in unsuspecting survivors. If you're in or near the industrial district, approach any signs of activity with extreme caution. Observe from a safe distance if possible, but do not attempt to make contact without careful planning and a reliable escape route. Here's a peculiar rumor that's been making the rounds. There are stories of infected individuals that glow in the dark. Yes, you heard that right. According to these tales, some infected have been seen emitting a faint bluish glow, particularly visible at night. Now, this sounds like something out of a science fiction story, and it's entirely possible that's exactly what it is, a story that's grown in the telling. However, we can't entirely dismiss it. We know the virus has caused significant mutations in human biology. It's not outside the realm of possibility that it could cause bioluminescence in some cases. If there's any truth to this, it could actually be a beneficial development for survivors, making infected easier to spot at night. However, it could also make them more dangerous if they're drawn to each other's glow, potentially leading to larger congregations of infected. For now, treat this as an unconfirmed rumor, but if any of you happen to see any glowing infected, please find a way to report it. Just don't get too close trying to verify it. Let's discuss another persistent rumor. The existence of government or military bunkers that have remained operational throughout the outbreak. We've heard variations of this story from many different sources. Some claim these bunkers house high-ranking officials and scientists working on a cure. Others suggest they're stockpiles of supplies and weapons. While we can't confirm the existence of these bunkers, it's not an implausible idea. Many governments had contingency plans for large-scale disasters. It's possible that some of these facilities have managed to remain operational. If these bunkers do exist, they could be incredible resources for survivors. However, they would also likely be heavily guarded and difficult to access. If any of you have concrete information about the location of such facilities, please find a way to share it. But do not attempt to breach any secure military installations you might stumble upon. The risks far outweigh any potential benefits. Now, here's a rumor that's been causing some concern. There are reports of infected animals. Up until now, we've only seen the virus affect humans, but several survivor groups have reported encountering animals that display behavior similar to infected humans. These reports mostly involve larger mammals like deer and bears, describing them as unusually aggressive and apparently immune to pain. Some stories even claim these animals actively hunt humans in the same way infected do. We haven't been able to confirm any of these reports, and it's possible they're the result of misunderstandings or exaggerated encounters with normal wildlife. However, if there's any truth to this, it would represent a significant and dangerous development in the outbreak. For now, continue to exercise caution around all wildlife, as you should be doing anyway. If you observe any animals behaving strangely, especially displaying unusual aggression or apparent insensitivity to injury, retreat immediately and report your observations if possible. Let's move on to a more positive rumor. There are stories circulating about a group of survivors who have managed to create a small-scale manufacturing operation. According to these reports, this group has set up in an old factory and is producing basic but crucial items like soap, candles, and simple tools. If true, this could be a significant step towards rebuilding some level of civilization. The ability to manufacture goods, even on a small scale, could greatly improve the quality of life for survivors and open up new possibilities for trade and cooperation between groups. The reports place this manufacturing group somewhere in the southern part of the region. If any of you have information about this or have encountered any newly manufactured goods in your travels, please find a way to let us know. This kind of initiative and ingenuity is exactly what we need to start rebuilding our world. Now, let's address a disturbing rumor that's been causing some panic. There are stories of a new strain of the virus that can spread through the air. According to these tales, this new strain allows the virus to infect people without direct contact, potentially through respiratory transmission. I want to be very clear. We have no evidence that this is true. All of our observations so far indicate that the virus still requires direct fluid contact to spread. These rumors are likely the result of fear and misinformation. However, we can't entirely dismiss the possibility. Viruses can mutate, and we've seen this one adapt in other ways. Continue to take all necessary precautions to avoid infection, but don't let this unconfirmed rumor cause undue panic. As always, if you observe anything that might suggest a change in how the virus spreads, report it immediately. Here's an interesting rumor that's been circulating. Some survivors claim to have encountered infected individuals that seem to retain some level of intelligence. These stories describe infected who use simple tools, set basic traps, and even attempt to communicate through grunts and gestures. Now, this goes against everything we've observed about the infected so far. All evidence up to this point suggests that the virus completely destroys higher cognitive functions. However, we can't entirely rule out the possibility of the virus evolving in unexpected ways. If there's any truth to these rumors, it would represent a significant and potentially terrifying development. Infected that retain some level of intelligence, far more dangerous than the mindless infected we've dealt with so far. For now, continue to treat all infected as extreme threats. Do not attempt to communicate with them or assume they have any remnant of their former selves. But if you observe any infected behaving in unusually intelligent ways, retreat immediately and find a way to report your observations. As we wrap up this segment on rumors and unconfirmed reports, I want to again stress the importance of critical thinking. In our current world, information can be just as valuable as food or water, but misinformation can be deadly. Always question what you hear, verify information when possible, and use your judgment. Remember, even if these rumors turn out to be false, the act of sharing and discussing them can be valuable. It keeps us thinking, planning, and preparing for potential changes in our situation. It reminds us to stay vigilant and adaptable. Stay safe out there, and keep listening to Station Beacon. We'll be back soon with more updates and survival tips. This is Atlas, reminding you that in knowledge lies our best hope for survival, but wisdom lies in knowing how to use that knowledge. In our next segment, we'll be discussing resource management and rationing strategies. In our scarcity-driven world, making the most of what we have is crucial, so don't miss it. Welcome back to Station Beacon. This is Atlas, and in this segment, we'll be diving deep into resource management and rationing strategies. In our post-outbreak world, making the most of limited supplies isn't just a matter of efficiency, it's often the difference between survival and disaster. So let's explore some key principles and practical techniques for managing your resources effectively. Let's start with the most fundamental resource, water. Clean water is absolutely crucial for survival, and in many areas, it's becoming increasingly scarce. The first step in water management is minimizing waste. Inspect all your water containers regularly for leaks. Even a small drip can add up to a significant loss over time. When it comes to water usage, prioritize drinking and cooking needs. If you're in a water-scarce area, you might need to limit or eliminate water use for hygiene. In these cases, waterless hand sanitizers and dry shampoos can be valuable. For washing dishes, consider using a 3-bucket system. One for initial rinsing, one with soapy water for washing, and one with a small amount of clean water for final rinsing. This can significantly reduce water consumption compared to running water methods. For those of you with access to natural water sources, remember that moving water is generally safer than stagnant water. However, all natural water should be treated before consumption. If you're using chemical treatments like iodine or chlorine tablets, be sure to follow the instructions carefully. Using too little won't effectively purify the water, while using too much can be harmful. Now, let's talk about food rationing. The key here is to plan for the long term. It's better to slightly reduce portions now than to run out of food entirely later. Start by taking a complete inventory of your food supplies. Categorize items by nutritional value and shelf life. When planning meals, aim for a balance of nutrients. It's tempting to eat all the most appealing foods first, but this can lead to nutritional deficiencies later. Try to incorporate a mix of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats in each meal. Don't neglect micronutrients like vitamins and minerals. These are crucial for long-term health. If you're part of a group, consider centralizing food supplies. This allows for better inventory management and ensures everyone gets a fair share. However, it's also wise for each person to keep a small personal emergency stash, just in case. For those of you engaged in hunting or foraging, remember that these activities require energy expenditure. Make sure the calories you're gaining from these activities outweigh what you're spending. In some cases, it might be more efficient to focus on less energy-intensive food procurement methods. Let's move on to medical supplies. These are often overlooked in initial survival planning, but they're absolutely crucial. Start by inventorying all your medical supplies. Know exactly what you have and where it is. In emergency situations, you don't want to be scrambling to find a crucial item. Prioritize the use of medical supplies. Minor cuts and scrapes might not need full bandage treatment if supplies are low. In some cases, improvised solutions like clean cloth strips can substitute for commercial bandages. However, never compromise on treating serious injuries or preventing infection. These can quickly become life-threatening in our current world. For medications, particularly antibiotics, it's crucial to use them correctly. Taking partial courses of antibiotics can lead to antibiotic-resistant infections, which is the last thing we need in our current situation. If you start a course of antibiotics, complete it unless you have severe adverse reactions. Now, let's discuss energy management. If you have access to electricity, whether through generators, solar panels, or other means, it's important to use it wisely. Prioritize essential uses like communication equipment and medical devices. Lighting is important for safety and morale, but consider using low-energy options like LED lights to conserve power. For those of you using fuel-powered generators, remember that the noise can attract both infected and potentially hostile survivors. Use them sparingly and have a plan to quickly shut them down and conceal them if necessary. Battery management is another crucial aspect of energy rationing. If you have rechargeable batteries, set up a rotation system to ensure you always have some charged and ready to use. For non-rechargeable batteries, use them in order of expiration date. Store batteries in a cool, dry place to extend their life. Let's talk about tool and weapon maintenance. In our world, a broken tool or weapon can be more than just an inconvenience. It can be deadly. Establish a regular maintenance schedule for all your crucial equipment. Clean and oil metal parts to prevent rust. Sharpen blades regularly. If you have firearms, clean them after each use if possible. When it comes to using tools and weapons, always consider whether the use is necessary. Every time you use a tool, you're contributing to its wear and tear. Sometimes, a more labor-intensive method might be preferable if it preserves your limited tools. Now, let's address clothing and textiles. In many areas, acquiring new clothing is no longer as simple as going to a store. Proper care of your existing clothing can significantly extend its lifespan. Learn basic sewing skills to repair tears and holes. When washing clothes, use cold water if possible to prevent shrinkage and color fading. For those of you in colder climates, layering clothes is more efficient than relying on a single heavy garment. This also allows you to adjust your temperature more easily, which can be crucial for conserving energy and staying comfortable in variable conditions. Let's discuss shelter maintenance. Your shelter is your primary defense against both the elements and the infected. Regular inspections can catch small problems before they become major issues. Check for leaks, drafts, and signs of structural weakness. In multi-story buildings, be particularly vigilant about floors and stairs. A collapse could be catastrophic. If you're using wood for heating or cooking, practice sustainable harvesting if possible. Cutting down live trees for firewood can have long-term negative impacts on your local ecosystem. Instead, focus on collecting dead wood. If you must cut live trees, do so selectively and in a way that allows for regrowth. Now, let's talk about information as a resource. In our world, knowledge can be just as valuable as physical supplies. If you have access to books, especially those with practical information about survival skills, medicine, or technology, treat them as precious resources. Store them in dry, safe places. Consider creating a catalog system so you can quickly find the information you need. For those of you keeping journals or records, consider redundancy. Keep multiple copies in different locations if possible. The information you're recording could be invaluable for future survivors or efforts to rebuild society. Let's address the psychological aspect of resource management. Living with scarcity can be incredibly stressful. It's important to find a balance between prudent conservation and quality of life. Allowing for small luxuries occasionally can be crucial for morale. This might be an extra ration of a favorite food, or using a small amount of precious fuel to power a music player for a community gathering. Remember, human energy is also a resource that needs to be managed. Burnout is a real risk in our high-stress world. Establish work rotations to ensure everyone gets adequate rest. If possible, set aside time for relaxation and recreational activities. These aren't frivolous, they're investments in the long-term mental health and cohesion of your group. For those of you managing resources for a group, transparency is crucial. Clear, fair rationing systems can prevent conflicts and ensure everyone understands the necessity of conservation. Consider involving the whole group in major resource decisions when possible. This can increase buy-in and help everyone feel invested in the community's success. Now, let's talk about creative reuse and repurposing. In our scarcity-driven world, the ability to see new potential in everyday objects is invaluable. Plastic bottles can become planters for small gardens. Old clothing can be turned into bandages, cleaning rags, or even rope if unraveled. Metal cans can be turned into improvised stoves or used to create alarms. Develop a mindset where you consider the potential alternative uses of an item before discarding it. What might seem like trash could be a crucial resource in the right situation. Let's discuss the importance of inventory management. Knowing exactly what resources you have, where they are, and when they expire is crucial for effective rationing. Establish a system for tracking your supplies. This could be as simple as a notebook inventory or more complex if you have access to computers. Regular inventory checks are important not just for tracking usage, but also for detecting any theft or unexplained losses. In our world, even small losses can have big impacts, so stay vigilant. For groups with the capability, consider establishing a barter system with other survivor communities. This can help alleviate shortages and make the most of each group's unique resources. However, approach such arrangements with caution and start small to build trust. Now, let's talk about long-term resource planning. While day-to-day survival is obviously the priority, it's important to think about the future. Consider setting aside a portion of your resources as a long-term reserve. This could be crucial if you face an unexpected crisis or need to relocate suddenly. For those of you working towards more sustainable living, every resource you can produce yourself is one less thing you need to scavenge or trade for. Even small steps towards self-sufficiency, like growing herbs in windowsill planters, can make a difference over time. Let's address a difficult topic: resource allocation in medical emergencies. There may come a time when you have to make hard decisions about using limited medical supplies. Establish guidelines in advance for triage situations. These decisions are never easy, but having a predetermined protocol can help in the heat of the moment. For those of you with specialized equipment like radios or scientific instruments, proper care is crucial. These items may be irreplaceable in our current world. Store them properly, use them carefully, and if possible, train multiple people in their use and maintenance. Now, let's talk about the importance of adaptation in resource management. Our world is constantly changing, and our approach to resources needs to change with it. Stay flexible in your thinking. A resource that's scarce now might become abundant later, or vice versa. Be prepared to adjust your rationing and usage patterns as circumstances change. Remember, effective resource management isn't just about stretching your supplies. It's about maximizing their impact on your survival and quality of life. Every decision you make about resource use should be weighed against its long-term implications. As we wrap up this segment on resource management and rationing, I want to emphasize that these skills are about more than just surviving. They're about laying the groundwork for eventually rebuilding. Every day that we survive, every resource we use wisely, brings us one step closer to a future where scarcity is no longer our constant companion. Stay resourceful, stay adaptable, and keep listening to Station Beacon. We'll be back soon with more updates and survival tips. This is Atlas, reminding you that in our hands and minds lie the keys to not just surviving this crisis, but eventually overcoming it. In our next segment, we'll be sharing some final thoughts and reflections on our ongoing struggle for survival. The road ahead is long, but together, we have the strength to face whatever challenges lie ahead. Stay tuned, and remember, you are not alone in this fight. Welcome back to Station Beacon. This is Atlas, and we've reached the final segment of our broadcast. I want to take this time to share some closing thoughts and reflections on our ongoing struggle for survival. We've covered a lot of ground in this broadcast, from practical survival tips to community building strategies, from the latest observations on infected behavior to long-term planning for a sustainable future. Now, let's step back and look at the bigger picture of our situation and what it means for humanity. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge the incredible resilience and adaptability that all of you have shown. The world as we knew it ended, and yet here we are, still fighting, still surviving. Every day that we continue to exist in this hostile new world is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. You should all be proud of how far you've come. But I also want to recognize the immense challenges and hardships we've all faced. We've lost loved ones, homes, and the sense of security we once took for granted. We've had to make difficult decisions and face dangers that would have seemed unimaginable in our previous lives. The weight of these experiences is heavy, and it's okay to acknowledge that. In the face of these challenges, it's natural to sometimes feel hopeless or overwhelmed. But I want to remind you all of something crucial. We are not alone in this fight. Across the country, across the world, there are other survivors like us, fighting to stay alive, to protect their loved ones, to hold on to their humanity. Every time you make radio contact with another group, every time you encounter fellow survivors in your travels, you're seeing proof that humanity endures. Let's talk about the progress we've made since the early days of the outbreak. In those first chaotic weeks, survival was a day-to-day struggle. Now, many of you have established secure shelters, found sustainable food sources, and formed communities. You've learned new skills, adapted to new realities, and found strength you might never have known you had. We've seen incredible ingenuity in how survivors have adapted to our new world. From repurposing everyday items into vital tools, to developing new techniques for avoiding the infected, to finding ways to generate power and grow food in the most challenging conditions. This creativity, this problem-solving spirit, is what will ultimately see us through this crisis. But we can't become complacent. The infected are still out there, and as we've discussed, they seem to be evolving, becoming more dangerous. We must remain vigilant, continue to observe and learn, and always be prepared to adapt our strategies. Now, let's look ahead to the future. While our immediate focus must always be on survival, it's important to think about the long term. What kind of world do we want to rebuild once we've overcome this crisis? This isn't just idle speculation. The decisions we make now, the values we uphold, will shape the future we're fighting for. I believe we have an opportunity here, amidst all the tragedy and hardship, to build something better than what came before. We've seen how fragile our old systems were, how quickly they collapsed in the face of this crisis. As we rebuild, we can create more resilient communities, more sustainable ways of living, more equitable societies. But this future won't build itself. It will require hard work, cooperation, and a commitment to values beyond mere survival. We need to preserve knowledge, maintain our humanity, and never lose sight of the larger goal. Not just to survive, but to thrive and rebuild. Education will be crucial in this effort. Those of you with specialized knowledge, whether it's in medicine, engineering, agriculture, or any other field, have a responsibility to share that knowledge to ensure it's not lost. For those of you with children in your groups, finding ways to continue their education is one of the most important things you can do for the future. We also need to think about governance and justice in our new world. The old systems are gone, but we still need ways to make decisions, resolve conflicts, and ensure the safety and well-being of our communities. The structures we create now will form the foundation of our future society. Let's strive to make them fair, transparent, and adaptable. Now, I want to address something that I know many of you have been thinking about: the possibility of a cure. The truth is, we don't know if a cure for this virus is possible, but we do know that giving up the search would be giving up on humanity. Somewhere out there might be scientists working in secure facilities, striving to understand this virus and how to stop it. And even if there aren't, every piece of information we gather about the virus, every observation we make about infected behavior, could be crucial in eventually developing a cure. So keep observing, keep recording, keep sharing information. You never know which piece of knowledge might be the key to our salvation. Let's talk about the importance of maintaining our mental health in these challenging times. The constant stress of survival, the trauma we've all experienced, the isolation many of us face, these can take a severe toll on our psychological well-being. But maintaining our mental health isn't just about feeling better. It's about staying sharp, making good decisions, and holding on to our humanity. Find ways to support each other emotionally. Create spaces where it's okay to be vulnerable, to express fear and grief, but also make time for joy, for laughter, for celebrating small victories. These moments of lightness aren't frivolous. They're essential for our long-term resilience. I want to remind you all of the power of hope. In our darkest moments, when survival seems impossible, hope can give us the strength to keep going. Hope isn't about denying the reality of our situation. It's about believing in our ability to overcome it. Every day that we survive, every skill we learn, every connection we make with other survivors is a reason for hope. Now, let's address a difficult but important topic: how we treat other survivors. In our struggle for survival, it can be tempting to see other groups as competition for scarce resources. But this kind of thinking is short-sighted. The chance for long-term survival, for eventually overcoming this crisis, lies in cooperation. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be cautious. Trust must be earned, especially in our dangerous world. But approach other survivors with an open mind. Establish communication, set up fair trade systems, share information. The more we can create networks of cooperating survivor communities, the stronger we'll all be. Let's talk about the importance of maintaining our humanity in the face of this crisis. The infected may have lost their human nature, but we must not lose ours. The decisions we make, the way we treat each other, the values we uphold, these define who we are. In fighting for our survival, we're also fighting to preserve what makes us human. This means making hard choices sometimes. It means sharing resources even when they're scarce. It means taking risks to help others. It means holding on to concepts like justice, compassion, and dignity, even when the world around us seems to have abandoned them. Our humanity is not a luxury we can discard. It's the very thing we're fighting to preserve. I want to acknowledge the incredible acts of heroism and kindness that I've heard about from many of you. Survivors risking their lives to save strangers. Communities coming together to protect their most vulnerable members. People sharing their last bits of food with those in need. These actions, in the face of overwhelming adversity, show the best of what humanity is capable of. Now, let's look to the future. The road ahead is long and fraught with dangers. We don't know how long this crisis will last, or what new challenges we might face. But I want you all to imagine, for a moment, the world we're fighting for. A world where the infected are no longer a threat, where we can rebuild our cities, replant our fields, reestablish our societies. A world where children can grow up without fear, where we can once again pursue knowledge, art, and progress for their own sakes. This world is possible. It's what every one of you is fighting for, whether you realize it or not. Every day that you survive, every infected you evade, every resource you manage carefully, brings us one step closer to that world. But we won't get there through mere survival. We need to do more than just exist. We need to lay the groundwork for that better future. This means preserving knowledge, teaching the next generation, maintaining our technological skills as best we can. It means thinking beyond our immediate needs to the long-term sustainability of our actions. I want to remind you all of the incredible adaptability of nature. In areas where human activity has decreased, we're seeing wildlife return, plants reclaim urban spaces. While our focus must be on survival, we should also take hope from these signs of nature's resilience. The earth is healing, even as we struggle. Our goal should be to find a way to survive and thrive that works in harmony with this healing, not against it. As we face the challenges ahead, remember that you are part of something larger than yourself. You're not just fighting for your own survival or even just for the survival of your immediate group. You're fighting for the survival of our species, for the continuation of human civilization. Every day that you survive, every bit of knowledge you preserve or discover, every child you protect and teach, is a victory for all of humanity. I want to address those of you who are alone, who haven't found a group or community to join. Your struggle is perhaps the hardest of all, but you are not forgotten. Your survival is just as important, your efforts just as valuable. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and don't give up hope of finding others. There are survivors out there, and one day you will find them. To those of you in leadership positions within your communities, I want to acknowledge the heavy burden you bear. The responsibility of making decisions that affect the lives of others is not an easy one. Remember to take care of your own mental health, to share the load when you can, and to remain open to input from those you lead. Your role is crucial in shaping the future we're all fighting for. As we near the end of this broadcast, I want to remind you all of the importance of information sharing. Your experiences, your observations, the techniques you've developed for survival, all of these could be invaluable to other survivors. Find ways to share this knowledge. Leave messages in safe locations, use radio communications if you have them, pass on information to other groups you encounter. In sharing knowledge, we multiply our collective strength. Remember, every one of you listening to this broadcast is a crucial part of humanity's survival story. Whether you're a skilled fighter, a knowledgeable mechanic, a compassionate caregiver, or simply someone who's managed to stay alive against all odds, you matter. Your survival, your efforts, your humanity in the face of unimaginable challenges. These are what give me hope for our future. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and above all, stay human. Keep fighting, keep surviving, keep hoping. The road ahead is long, but together, we have the strength to face whatever challenges lie ahead. This is Atlas, signing off from Station Beacon. Until next time, remember, in our unity lies our strength, in our humanity lies our hope, and in our perseverance lies our future. Stay safe out there, and keep listening. We'll be back with more updates, more survival tips, and more hope for our shared future. Together we will survive. Together we will rebuild. Together we will thrive again.